The gigantic continent where they live is governed by the empire controlled by the four greatest families. The representatives of swordsmanship and martial arts are the family of the Golden Lion, Domus Leonis. The representatives of priests and worshippers of the various gods that exist in the empire are called Societas Fidei. There is also the intelligence organization that secretly serves the royal family, the Oculus. And lastly, among all the families, a guild of mages that guides civilization through magic, the Turium. But there was another family also renowned for their magical abilities, the family of our protagonist, Mervinger. 30 years ago, when the war against the demons began, his family fought on different fronts, leading the anti-demonic forces to victory, but it came at a high cost. Many of his relatives lost their lives, and when he turned 8, his father died due to the war, as did his mother, who had been his first teacher. He and his sister became orphans overnight, and all they had was each other. The many followers of their family once had turned their backs the moment this happened. Having lived through that at such a young age made him wish to become a great mage, so he could restore the glory of his family. That was his initial plan, but he was soon confronted with the harsh reality that he couldn't even use the basics. He had a rare condition that prevented his body from circulating mana normally. He tried everything he could, but became the target of ridicule. Even most miraculous methods had no effect at all. Even so, he did not give up, and after trying for a long time, he seemed to have arrived at something interesting, for his path crossed with that of an ancient dragon. That was his last chance to have his condition healed so he could restore the glory carried by his family's name. Only, he could never have imagined something worse would happen. That majestic, magnificent dragon had been annihilated. This had been the work of a mysterious figure with horns on their head, and looking at the protagonist's body, they thought of possessing it. That was the only way they had to escape that dreadful prison. The mysterious figure tried to seduce the boy so that they would become one, promising him that they would rebuild a new world after rejecting the one that exists. Demonstrating part of his power, he revealed himself to be truly powerful and intimidating. Our protagonist was being swallowed by all that energy. There was nothing he could do, and he began to curse himself. For he was being completely devoured and unable to put up any kind of resistance, but he didn't know it was a test from the very Prince of Shadows. If he had known that, he would never have sought the dragon's whereabouts. Thus his body began to be assimilated, and the shadows were swallowing him whole, until a mysterious light appeared in one of his eyes. Our protagonist would not allow it to be that easy. He would not be devoured by that energy. The boy's eyes opened slowly. He has a condition called mana avascularity, which prevents magical power from circulating through his body. The doctor said he had already tried everything possible, and now there are no more options. Feeling guilty for giving the boy this sad news, he said the boy might never be able to use magic. Already at the academy, he is still completely immersed in that diagnosis and hadn't even heard Heise's words. The young woman asked how he was feeling, what the doctor's diagnosis was, and whether there was a cure for the condition, as she could lend him money. Our protagonist asked his sister not to worry because he would be fine eventually. She tried to get more information, but the boy ended the call, for he still doesn't know how to deal with this news. He doesn't know how to tell his sister that he might have to return home much sooner than planned. Outside, some students are discussing the difficulty of the test, saying it had been very hard. Even though he's unable to use magic in the theoretical part, our protagonist is an extremely exemplary student. The other students use this as an even bigger reason to mock him, since all the protagonist does is study. Even so, there's a part of his evaluation that is not perfect. He fails in all practical disciplines, failing once again at the academy. This is already the 4th consecutive failure, and according to the Academy's rules, he may now face consequences. From now on, our protagonist may be expelled, and this would prevent him from restoring the honor of his family. That would make all his effort in vain, as he needed excellent grades to remain at the Academy and someday become a great mage. For that, he read countless books, which contributed greatly to his exceptional performance in theoretical classes. He did so well in the subjects that he thought he was somehow special, but now he realizes he was just arrogant, even though he doesn't only have intelligence. He also has a natural instinct to detect and interpret mana. From theory to energy control, he has talents every mage would wish to have. The problem is that he couldn't put it into practice, and it doesn't matter if his potential is greater than everyone else's. He still needed to do the basics, but nothing would come from his hands. Our protagonist had to endure all the mocking comments about himself. One of his professors said he should become one too and could make good recommendations for him. Maybe that really is the best future he could achieve, but it wouldn't be enough to restore the glory of his family. Inside the academy, there is a large statue built in honor of our protagonist's grandfather. He was a great hero during the Demon War, also known as the Mage of the Stars. A mere snap of his fingers was enough. Annihilation would rain down on the battlefield. His name was Uzdan Mervinger, a man whose talent truly exceeded even that of his peers. His talent was so great that the academy where our protagonist now studies was built by his grandfather, bearing his name and being the finest magic institute in the entire empire. Some jealous people wonder how a loser like the protagonist could be related to the founder of the school. They say he is the shame of his entire family. These people had no shame in making no effort to be discreet. Even so, our protagonist remained firm. While he was in the garden, he saw that those people were walking away. He decided to approach them, asking if they were freshmen in the magical discipline class. They confirmed. Getting closer, he said that one of the assistant professors is named Scene, and they are great friends. So he got a small question for these people who have had name badges on their uniforms. Our protagonist wanted to know what their names were, because he was very interested in seeing what Scene would do with some freshmen who liked to mess with one of his friends. The two quickly covered their name tags, afraid they might face some kind of reprisal. Our protagonist kept staring at them firmly, until he noticed something else. He was standing in front of his grandfather's statue and started thinking about what his life would be like if his grandfather or even his father were still alive. But he quickly came back to his senses. He has no one, and he'll have to deal with that on his own. And as for his goals, he is now permanently determined. Sitting at a table, the boy continues going through various documents. He's reading many articles, and so far, there's no sign that his condition can be cured. While he was reading, he noticed something approaching, and had his face slammed against the table in a brutal manner. It was so sudden that other academy students around him were terrified. Our protagonist grabs his head, feeling a lot of pain. He got up angrily, wanting to know who the idiot was that did that, but the culprit said there was only one person it could be. That was Scene, who didn't like his name being used to threaten people. Our protagonist tried to change the subject by saying they're friends, but Scene had already asked him not to do that sort of thing. He completely ignores Scene's warning and asked if he wanted to get some juice, while Scene is left stunned by his shameless friend. But he still insisted that he had already asked him not to do that kind of thing anymore. Scene Arresta, besides being a great friend, is a special person. Since the fall of the protagonist's family, Naturium has been led by 6 families of the Empire. One of them is the Neresta family, and his friend is preparing to become a great professor. At least those are his plans after graduating from the academy. Even though they are on completely opposite paths, he is the only friend our protagonist has, being a strong supporter. Scene was bothered by the expression on our protagonist's face and asked him to behave already, because there was something he needed to deliver to him. The boy looked at those papers without knowing what they meant, until he realized it was an exploration plan about the Diamond Dragon's refuge. Then he asked what that had to do with him. A study suggests they may have identified the location of its nest. He suggested the protagonist join the exploration team because this is a proto-dragon. After hearing those words, he immediately became interested. Since this type of mystical creature is the origin of magic in the world, he wouldn't be rejected by the academy if he brought back something truly useful, and with a wide smile on his face, he began bragging about being a good friend. But our protagonist is no longer thinking about expulsion. He believes you might find a cure for his disease there. Since it's not a personal project, he'll have to share the credit with his friend. After thinking for a bit, he slammed his hand on the table. His attitude was so unexpected that his friend became slightly uneasy. But our protagonist is confident that now the gods will be on his side, because this news is so impressive, it seems like a lie, making the boy start laughing uncontrollably. While his friend has no idea what this lunatic is scheming this time, since he doesn't understand the reason for the laughter, until our protagonist called attention to a spot on the map that was already marked. He said with great confidence that the creature's nest is not in that place. Our protagonist made a point of saying it again with even more confidence. His friend began looking around. Behind our protagonist, the boy seemed distracted, and the other students didn't seem interested in their conversation either. That's very good, as it's possible no one heard. He warned that our protagonist needs to be careful, since many professors participated in that research, and it could cause problems. But the boy kept insisting that what he said is true. He said, almost whispering, that he should rub the protagonist's face into the pavement, and the boy replied that Scene should behave like a noble. Starting to use magic and very interested in the protagonist's words, he asked him to try to convince him of it. Then the map on the table began to glow, until the light grew even stronger. It was as if they were now inside the map between the fissure of 2 large tectonic plates. From that place, a great amount of mana flowed, and theoretically, it met all the criteria to be the nest of a dragon. So he asked his friend to tell him what the 3 principles of mana flow are, but he thought that must be a joke. Trying to understand the protagonist's point of view, he began to recite from top to bottom, from the widest to the narrowest. Thus, he was already inside what would be a cave, because the last principle says it goes from where it is hot to where it is cold, and he began to notice the ice in that place. Our protagonist said that if he used those principles, he too would think the dragon's nest was in that fissure. But he needs to remember that there is a very hot water flow in that other location, which disrupts mana accumulation, making the place unsuitable for a dragon. Those few words convinced Scene of the truth, since in that location, there was a source of extreme heat, Mount Akron, which spews lava profusely. The heated water from that place circulates throughout the continent. Only, according to research, they detected magical energy from a dragon in that place. It makes no sense that this wouldn't be the nest. But our protagonist never said there wouldn't be a nest in that place. It's even possible that it really is located there. But on the map, he pointed to a nearby location, stating that the nest is in that cave Caragol. Inside it, there is a large gate, and our protagonist believes the nest must be hidden in that place. Now his friend doesn't know how to explain this to the headmaster of the academy. He hesitates a bit before knocking on that door, because he knows this could lead to his expulsion. The problem is that the protagonist's words make a lot of sense, and he began to remember past days in that place. In one of the rooms, he could observe our protagonist. because he had no idea the boy was still in the training room. All of that was part of his purpose in becoming the greatest of mages, but his condition made anything impossible. That change in the research could bring them closer to a cure for his friend's condition. And being a true and loyal friend, that's the only thing he can do. And gathering courage, he managed to speak to the headmaster, becoming quite intrigued by the student's proposition until he asked if he really believed all the other researchers were mistaken. But Scene didn't want it to come across that way, he just wanted to consider the possibility that they might be wrong. The headmaster has no idea how he reached that conclusion, but if he can't be convinced here, he doesn't care at all about that student's noble origins, which means he'll face all the consequences of this alteration. The boy realized that Fatty has an immense amount of mana. This pressure is almost the size of his butt. But both are interrupted by the sudden opening of the doors. Scene couldn't believe the protagonist could enter there. The headmaster didn't like it at all and asked if Elric was insane. Our protagonist bowed politely, apologizing for entering in such a way. Automatically, Fatty found it quite interesting, accepting the boy's apology and immediately assumed that the news given by the assistant professor had come from him. The boy took responsibility for that information. The headmaster acknowledges that the boy is indeed very talented, but that his hypothesis is based on a guess and lacks evidence. Our protagonist said his opinion is based on common sense that even a child would understand. For that, no proof is needed. After that conviction-filled statement, the two began to stare at each other intensely. Scene started crying internally, seeing that the protagonist was provoking Fatty. Immediately, the headmaster began laughing at that speech, because it was coming from a student who can't even use mana. This must be a joke. Our protagonist asked if he really believed his hypothesis was wrong. The headmaster said that from time to time, very lucky people show up, but also those who are worthless and don't know where they belong, like the protagonist. Only Fatty is also a professor, and he knows he can't completely ignore that opinion. So he came to a conclusion, suggesting that he and the protagonist make a little wager. Our boy became very interested, asking him to elaborate on the proposal. Fatty would guarantee the student the right to recruit an exploration team. He would even sponsor the mission with academy resources. It would be up to him to find the location of that nest, but there would be a consequence for failure. That he hand over to Fatty the only inheritance left by his grandfather. Once inside the carriage, Scene asked if the protagonist had gone completely insane. Totally relaxed, he advised his friend to do the same and to not raise his voice when speaking to him, reminding him that the headmaster had promised to let him remain in the academy if they found the dragon's nest. But his friend took the book from the protagonist's hands, who ended up complaining, saying he was in the middle of reading it. His friend is worried about a possible failure, as the inheritance of the protagonist's family is now at stake, and it had been passed down through generations within the family. That's not just any treasure. It's the magic necklace that was wagered. Our protagonist said the headmaster has wanted it since the first day, but his friend can't understand all that calmness. Until our protagonist revealed he was happy, since his friend had stayed by his side the entire time. Knowing that both will be doomed if they don't find the dragon's nest, Scene asks how they're going to do it. Our protagonist asked if he really believed he accepted the wager just to stay in that school. Scene was impressed by that sudden mood change, because the protagonist stated that the headmaster would never receive that treasure. It would be easier for him to lose weight than to get his hands on it. The boy had almost forgotten that our protagonist has two big nicknames, the first being the Great Shame of the Mervinger family. His other nickname is the Rabid Dog of the Mervinger family. That situation was very stressful for him, because he didn't like seeing that expression on his friend's face, and he began to remember the early days at the academy when all the freshmen were training. All of that happened 7 years ago. Our protagonist was still a 15-year-old boy. Some students came up to him and asked if he really carried the Mervinger surname, because it was unbelievable that he couldn't perform such simple spells. They started criticizing him, saying he must be adopted. It was truly a burdensome situation, but our protagonist wasn't the type to just listen without doing anything, and he made sure the arrogant student would learn that too, hitting the boy from behind with a glass wolf, leaving the other jerks stunned, learning firsthand that words have consequences. Steen felt sorry for our protagonist, but had even less pity for those who used to mess with him. Those actions led him to the disciplinary council, and our protagonist made sure to remind them that he is the heir of a duke and had been harassed by a viscount's family. All he did was punish that student according to imperial law, and he doesn't understand how that could have caused a problem. After that brief consideration, murmurs began to spread through the place. Even so, he was suspended, since students should be treated as equals. But after that isolated case, everyone understood what happens when they provoke the protagonist. That's a side of the boy Scene preferred not to know. After remembering all those things, he still managed to return. He began asking if the protagonist was truly insane, but was reminded that they were in a public place. That book he was reading had been banned from the Empire, and the boy asked what our protagonist was researching. Scratching his head carelessly, he acknowledged that he could be executed just for reading it. Scene didn't even know he was still capable of being surprised by his friend's madness. But he became interested in the research, asking what the protagonist wanted with the Tiger King's body fortification. The motivation is the same. Our protagonist wants a way to cure his condition. In ancient times, that Tiger King technique brought very difficult times to the Empire, And after he was expelled from Imperial lands, the body fortification he mastered was lost too. Scene already knows what this is about and read somewhere that researchers failed to restore this technique. Our protagonist said it was successfully restored, and now he needs to find a way to apply it to his body. His friend didn't know about this news, and faced with all that information, he no longer knew what to say. It was better to resign himself, until they were interrupted by the movement of the carriage, which stopped abruptly. They both stuck their heads out the window to see what had happened. The cause was a small group of people who hadn't seen our protagonist for some time. To him, that was truly an unexpected outcome. He asked what those guys were doing there, and one of them said they were all friends. The guy with glasses was named Liburn. Scene had already gotten out of the carriage, a bit more irritated, quite angry with them. They said it wasn't necessary to make a big deal, because they were only there by the headmaster's orders, who said they should help. Our protagonist was quite suspicious and said he didn't need any help. Scene leaned into his friend's ear to say that some of them were hiding their powers, but our protagonist said that's typical of those bastards. But he had also come well prepared for that, revealing something under his clothes. Scene didn't know how he managed to do that. All he could see on his friend's face was a very mocking smile. The headmaster was furious upon learning that the protagonist had taken the sky armor and the breath of Gehenna, but he himself had authorized full support for that expedition. The breath of Gehenna is capable of burning anything until only ashes remain. Meanwhile, the sky armor protects from elemental damage and physical attacks. Realizing what he had allowed, he ordered the student to leave his presence. The boy hurried out, leaving a furious fat man inside the room. The headmaster knows he can't let the other candidates discover anything about this. Now he needs to wait patiently, because there is a chance they might find the dragon's nest. After all, the protagonist is a Mervinger at the end of the day. He is expected to have talent. Now he realized he will need to get rid of some of his researchers, who failed to notice something so obvious that even a student could see it. The more he thinks about it, the more outraged he becomes, until he came to the conclusion that he should thank the students, because through their achievement, the headmaster will obtain the Mervinger heirloom. As soon as he has that item, he imagines he'll be the next minister. Truly, that bald fat man is a peculiar person. Crushing a paper furiously, he realized he may have lost that bet, but it will mean nothing if the boy doesn't return alive from that place. Our protagonist is now looking at another book. The other teammates are watching while Scene reads a spell. He needs to stay completely focused for this. At last, the mana-searching spell had been completed. An intense golden glow began to emanate from the boy's hands, until a great source of mana was found, much greater than they were expecting. That can only mean one thing: our protagonist wasn't wrong in his hypothesis. The other teammates are equally impressed with the discovery. The only one not surprised was our protagonist, who never doubted his hypothesis for a moment. Now he orders his expedition team to move. They need to find the right place before the pillar of light disappears. Scene grabbed our protagonist from behind just to make sure he didn't misunderstand anything, for they need to get there as quickly as possible. Using his mastery of magic, he left the expedition team behind, which made those silly boys feel abandoned. To reach the place marked by the spell, they had to take a long walk, and they arrived at the marked spot completely exhausted. But they ended up facing something even more unusual. At the spot indicated by the spell, there was nothing, not even a cave, and they began to wonder if the nest could be in an open field like that. Seeing that the results were inconclusive, one of the boys began to scheme. Now they could open the protagonist's skull without much difficulty. But his thoughts were interrupted because our protagonist had seen something, and he asked if Scene could open a very large hole in that spot, and his friend confirmed with great enthusiasm. The magical power grew more and more in the palm of his hands. Chanting another spell, he began to gather destructive power. A powerful fire spell was about to be launched, and thus a great explosion occurred in the middle of that plane, blasting the ground into the air, raising debris over a wide area. And there was something even more interesting at the epicenter of that explosion. Our protagonist said he had finally found it. The expedition team was increasingly surprised by the unfolding discoveries. That was a huge cave, and they were starting to realize there really might be a dragon inside. But before they could discuss it further, a blue energy began to pour from that place. It was so depressive and tense that it started pushing people away. Our protagonist tried to ask everyone to remain calm. They shouldn't be shaken by it, as it was just the release of accumulated mana through the hole they had made. Now it was time for all of them to enter that place. Our protagonist advanced without any fear, while the expedition team asked him to wait. The deeper they walked, the colder the cave became, and not even fire magic could warm that place. Our protagonist remained completely focused on his goal. He stopped mysteriously midway, and Scene wanted to know if he had seen something. The boy said he had only felt a chill run down his spine, and his friend said it was probably caused by the cold. While wearing the amulet around his neck, he let the expedition move ahead, thinking maybe his friend was right. But in the heart of the cave, a mysterious figure was waiting for all of them, and the arrival of these people would be a source of great joy. But not for everyone. The group came across an impressive structure. What stood before them was a door, but of enormous proportions. Some began suggesting they push it, while others wanted to destroy the door with magic, until a commanding voice ordered them all to stop. Our protagonist was surrounded by idiots and pointed out that the door was sealed with magic, and they couldn't know what would happen if they tried to destroy it, so they should act with caution. One of the students said he understood, but the truth was that he was seething with envy, having ignored an obvious detail. While the group began to discuss what they should do, that same envious boy started looking at the seal. Approaching the door, he began to observe that small object more closely. After explaining things to the group, our protagonist asked that none of them take individual actions past that point, as they didn't know what might happen. But that poor ignorant fool had ignored the entire explanation and was about to touch the object. Our protagonist tried to stop it, shouting desperately for him not to touch it. But the poor fool completely ignored the warning. As soon as he touched the object, a great luminous energy began to form beneath his feet. The heat was so intense, the boy began to feel his body being burned. Our protagonist saw it all, and now he was sure that Idiot had created yet another problem. The runes inscribed on the door began to glow, drawing everyone's attention. Faced with that, our protagonist told everyone to be cautious, as that was certainly a trap. The first of the extras got what he deserved, being mysteriously blown up. That was enough to put the others on high alert, preparing to resist the attacks using their magical barriers. Cian asked our protagonist what they should do now, as the situation was becoming very dangerous. He said he would try to decipher the text first. Being one of the only ones capable of saving those lives, our protagonist began to feel the weight of responsibility. For he was facing a riddle to be deciphered, and he decided to face it as if it were a problem, a small test. He decided that he would believe in himself because that's what he's been doing his whole life. So he continued writing down the runes in his notebook. The more time passed, the more the extras kept suffering. Our protagonist had to be quick to save those lives. But they were already being subdued by those traps. Time was running out quickly, until finally he placed his hands on the golden object. His companions only needed to hold on a little longer, as long as he didn't do anything wrong. He read those words and hoped he had done the right thing. Thanks to our protagonist's intervention, he managed to correct the mistake of that foolish student, putting an end to the trap's attacks. Several of them collapsed on the ground, exhausted, thinking they wouldn't survive that experience. But among all those people, there was only one he was truly worried about, and that was his friend Cian. He thanked our protagonist because he was only alive now thanks to his intervention, while many others had been injured. After that brilliant intervention, his admiration for the protagonist grew even more, and with a smug smile on his face, the boy said that this was his true power. But they still needed to remain cautious inside that cave. The sudden change in lighting caught everyone's attention. Something was heading toward the expedition members. One of the extras realized he had lost his arm. His despair over losing his right hand was so great that he collapsed, losing consciousness. Immediately, everyone else panicked too, and our protagonist began to wonder what that was. Several blue stones, which looked like ice, were floating in the air, and a great number of them targeted the protagonist. He wasn't obliterated only because his friend proved to be very useful. The others, who were also capable of using magic, were doing their best to maintain the barrier. Once again, our protagonist had to race against time to end that trap. Looking at the runes, he was trying to decipher what they were, writing with all the skill he had in the pages of his notebook. Seemed warned that he needed to be faster than before because the barrier wouldn't last much longer. Our protagonist began to recite the incantation in that ancient language, and his eyes began to shine. And in that state of mind, it seemed like he had glimpsed something that had been hidden. That was the true, genuine source of magic, and the language he was speaking was the language of dragons. Returning to the present, he still had that situation to resolve. Cian asked him to hurry because the situation was getting increasingly dangerous. Our protagonist advanced toward the gate. He needed to be quick if he wanted to save his friend's life. One of the envious ones found it unbelievable. He couldn't believe the protagonist was using that, because he wasn't killed by that ice spike thanks to the power of that item, the powerful sky armor. Now the question was how he had managed to use it. Thanks to the protection his body was wearing, he managed to grab that orb once again. And now he needed to make sure there were no more traps. The magical barrier was already severely compromised, and the ice spikes were coming from all directions. Cian wouldn't be able to defend himself from one that was coming from behind him. The eyes of our protagonist began to shine even more intensely. At the last moment, the ice spike shattered. No life would be lost in that place. Finally, the trap had vanished. Trying to catch his breath, the boy thought he was really going to die, and his clothes had been completely torn apart. On the other side, Cian began smiling with great relief. But the situation among the expedition members was mixed. Some were very happy and relieved, while others were deeply upset. Finally, a small forest was revealed at the junction of the door, which was slowly opening for those people, revealing what had been hidden inside. Now they needed to go inside. Our protagonist was surprised by everything that had happened since his hypothesis. That hall was filled with treasures. There was an enormous variety of magical instruments and even armor made of dragon scales, and the shelves were packed with ancient knowledge, leaving everyone deeply impressed. Despite everything, all those present were mages. Finally, one of the extras decided to congratulate the leader of the expedition, our protagonist. That sudden friendly atmosphere was quite unexpected. Receiving that recognition wasn't something he had prepared for. Cian approached to hug his friend, wanting to know what he had done to make it all work. Then he reminded the boy that he had a perfect score in the theoretical section and used what he had learned at the academy to solve that. But by treating the problem as if it were a test, he finally realized what he had done. Without a doubt, that test had not yet reached its end. Scene began asking why his friend had become so deeply distracted, but he said it was nothing. Placing his hand on the protagonist's shoulder, he said that he should smile, for this was a grand day. Because of what he had discovered, he could no longer be ignored as someone truly worthy of such a prestigious family. Apparently, our protagonist was more moved by those words than he should have been. Even though he was bothered by a few things, he decided he would not ignore this happiness. Some expedition members were analyzing all that treasure, and one of them already seemed to be doing something wrong. One of them desperately called for our protagonist. There was a laboratory in that place, and he should go there immediately. Siem was impressed that everyone was treating his friend so well until one of the expedition members said he had seen the body of a dragon behind the treasure. That news was even more interesting and needed to be communicated to our protagonist. But the envious one made a point of saying they needed to go quickly. The leader would arrive after them. So he led Siem to the supposed dragon's body. And indeed, the reach of its carcass lay over those treasures, and by its size, it must have been on the level of a dragon king. It may have been in that place for at least 4,000 years. Our protagonist discovered that all that kindness was nothing but a farce. He had been surrounded by the expedition members and had the sky armor stripped from his body. Because of the happiness he was feeling, he had let his guard down. One of them said it was nothing personal. Because of what they went through in that cave, he even learned to like the boy. But he needed to do his job. Siem was still quite intrigued by that carcass and asked his colleague a question, because he could swear if he saw those bones move. Our protagonist was already completely subdued. Meanwhile, the others were enjoying the exploration inside that cave. He tried to cry for help, but was immediately restrained by that man. The blow to his throat proved very effective, and our protagonist began to regret having trusted other people because he'd have come to that place for nothing. The bandit was ready to burn him with his flames, but his actions were interrupted by an even greater attack. Our protagonist watched what had happened even more terrified, because all that remained of that bandit was his small hand. Even frightened, he tried to understand what was happening, and decided to look toward the source of the disturbance. The other expedition members were running in panic, and were saying something about the dragon. Our protagonist saw Siem fleeing from the creature made of bones, but endowed with great power. Of the possible scenarios within that cave, the worst had happened. He watched the majesty of that creature, completely powerless. There was little he could do to maintain his own safety, and the dragon seemed determined to prevent them from leaving that cave alive. Our protagonist needed to think of something because he was certain that this was also a test. It wasn't enough that he had found the nest. He needed to prevent that creature from remaining alive. Only he couldn't say why the dragon had remained still. So he began to recall all the things that had happened inside that cave, coming to the conclusion that the creature needed to rest between one attack and another. He immediately ordered the expedition members to form a defensive line. They should prepare their shields, and each of them had to take their position. Thus, they managed to set up a barrier for the next attack. Finally, the creature had rested enough, unleashing a powerful attack against them. The barrier held firm, and it took the creature's blow without breaking its integrity. But cracks slowly began to form. The attack would last 20 seconds. They had to endure it to at least have a chance to escape. But the attack was truly intense. All the mages were already at their limits. Finally, the creature's energy had depleted, and our protagonist did the calculations. It takes 17 seconds to reach the door. If they could close it in 3, they could survive. It was only then that he realized what had just happened. Some expedition members had been turned to dust by the dragon's breath. The magical barrier was beginning to be completely disintegrated. The opportunity they needed was already happening. Our protagonist shouted for all of them to act now, because the time to run had arrived, and they fled in desperation. Our protagonist began to think they might have a chance to escape, but his hopes were completely stolen. Bodies were already falling to the ground. Blood began to fly everywhere, while bodies were being thrown. That wasn't what our protagonist had been expecting. Other creatures began to emerge as if they were reanimated corpses. These are the legendary beings entrusted with protecting the dragon, the Spartoa. Our protagonist, who cannot use magic, knows that his survival is completely compromised. But a fireball came approaching from behind him, annihilating the creature that tried to attack him. Sien is also doing his best to stay alive and asked the protagonist to make an effort as well. Seeing that his friend was determined, he couldn't lose hope either. He needs to reach a conclusion to solve that problem, and he is the only person capable of doing that inside the cave. For our protagonist, there's no problem without a solution. The treasure of his family began to shine discreetly. At the same time, the boy was struck by a severe headache. Opening his eyes, he began to find strange what he was seeing. Everything was very different. You could see green lines in the air like spider webs. It seems like his friend wants to say something, but he can't hear him. There was an order for him to dodge, but our protagonist didn't understand it properly, until he realized the creature had approached him from behind. Having the discernment of where the attack would come from, he managed to protect himself. But his movement had been so fast that even the creature was surprised. Not only the creature, but our protagonist also doesn't know how he did it. While trying to process all those events, more attacks were coming his way. This is not in his imagination, he is really able to see the attacks. In fact, he is seeing part of the future. And trying to understand those strange things, he presumed he would be safe if he followed those glowing points. There is a possibility that it could be a trap. But looking to the side, he saw that everyone was still fighting, and those suffering the most are the background characters. Our protagonist doesn't have time to think too much, as things are getting worse over time. As he moved his body, he completely disappeared. He passed through the creatures without them being able to do anything. He decided he wouldn't die in vain and ordered the expedition members to follow him. They need to do that immediately. The envious one, indirectly the cause of all the misfortunes in this cave event, is terrified. Our protagonist needs to go where his eyes are showing. He is the first to lead the way, and thanks to his eyes, he can avoid all the attacks. Immediately followed by his friend. Finally, that group of people managed to leave the heart of the cave. Some are already outside, but our protagonist knows it's essential for them to be able to close that door, and he is about to touch that metallic sphere, even though not everyone is safe yet. The desire to close the door is very strong, but he can't leave that guy behind. Even though he is a despicable person, our protagonist can't allow that. It's almost time for the reanimated creature to bring justice to this story, but our protagonist must be a pantheon of morality and good conduct and won't let the despicable one die. He runs against time. He needs to be faster than the creature. The boy opens his eyes, trying to understand what happened. Seeing that the creatures are still in the heart of the cave, even with the gates open, it seems they can't get out. Sean is very angry with his friend's recklessness, and the protagonist said it's the background character's fault for having weak legs. But they still have many unanswered questions. Those creatures really seem to be trapped inside. And our protagonist began to think about that. He saw there were traces of damage in that place. They were certainly not the first invaders in this cave. Looking at the dragon, he began to notice the details. There was something there on its skull. That object definitely shouldn't be there. While our protagonist is distracted by his thoughts, the cave begins to shake. The bespectacled background character said it's the creatures that are fleeing. Despair takes hold of all their hearts, but our protagonist remains immersed in his own thoughts. Sean looked back and saw something surprising. Our protagonist was re-entering the heart of the cave, making his friend desperate because that action is complete madness. With a smile on his face, he asked them to move on, saying he would claim all that loot alone. His friend, very worried, tried to rescue him, but he wouldn't reach the gates in time, leaving only the sound of his voice to pass through that crack. Sean is now isolated from his friend, and this situation leaves him completely worried, as he knows our protagonist cannot use magic. For him, this can only mean that the worst will happen somehow. He began to remember when the two met 7 years ago, right after our protagonist's first suspension. Elric was still a very reclusive student, and during their first interaction, he was not at all polite to the one who would become his best friend. Our protagonist spent a lot of time in the library, searching for information about his condition. Even so, Sean was not willing to give up on that. He truly wanted to be friends with our protagonist, who insisted otherwise. His determination was so great that he chased the boy through the academy corridors, but nothing he did produced any kind of result. During a class, they were instructed to be tenacious in order to become great mages. Points would be awarded based on a rival order. Those who used magic would be disqualified. Finally, the test begins. The students run through the forest, knowing they must reach the other side. But among them, there was someone who stood out. That was Sean himself, who had always been a very dedicated and resolute student. His pace was intense and far superior to that of his classmates. Realizing he had already passed the halfway point, he thought he should have brought our protagonist along. But while he was thinking, he ended up getting quite distracted. He tripped in the forest with such force it almost seemed like an explosion. His body began tumbling downhill, until he managed to hold onto a rock, but his body was hanging over a cliff. The boy began to cry for help, hoping someone would Mufasa him. Some of his classmates began to pass by the spot. They said he could use magic to lift himself up, so he should stop complaining about his situation. He said nothing because he knew that if he used magic, he would end up disqualified. The boy held on there for so long that his mind started to tire. He had no strength in his hands and didn't know how many minutes or hours had passed. If he fell, his life could be at risk, but he didn't want to be disqualified for using magic. His worry over the situation kept growing. If his performance led to disqualification, he didn't know how he could look his father in the eyes. Little by little, he began to accept that he wouldn't be able to overcome it until his hands were reached by someone else's. Our protagonist was rescuing the one who would become his best friend in the future. He simply asked him to hold on tight because he would do his best to pull him out of there. Finally rescued, the two sat on the ground to catch their breath. Sean told our protagonist to go on ahead because he would be late if he waited, revealing that his ankle was twisted. Our protagonist immediately realized the gravity of the situation. With his foot in that state, his classmate wouldn't be able to reach the finish line. He decided he would help him, even though Sean tried to insist he would slow him down. Finally, after being a standard sundeer, our protagonist decided they would be friends from then on. Even Sean wasn't expecting that, until the protagonist told him to forget that idea and hand over some valuable artifacts, which left the boy furious. But since they're friends, that kind of comment would become more and more frequent, and so they made it to the end of the test, being impertinent and annoying to each other, as if they had been friends for a long time. And now the boy's best friend is locked in a dangerous room, unable to use magic, surrounded by ferocious creatures. Scene began to be overtaken by a great feeling of frustration. He asked his friend to hold on just a bit longer, because he would call the elders of his family, or at least his father, to do something. He headed toward the cave exit, determined to bring help for his friend. All he hopes is that our protagonist doesn't die, something that is also wished by him. Elric couldn't allow his only friend to be in danger. Now he needs to take care of the safety trial, because there's a massive number of creatures determined to destroy our protagonist. But his movements are completely different now. His eyes can see what he couldn't before. The creature's attacks are truly ferocious. Our protagonist needs to reach a valuable item. He manages to dodge all the attacks with great ease, approaching his objective with a certain level of safety. Flames begin to burn inside that cave. Some of them envelop the boy's body, who had recovered what he was looking for, the weapon he brought from the academy. With that in hand, he is no longer defenseless. And now it's time to make those creatures taste their own medicine. That artifact could only be used by those who could wield mana. But our protagonist's determination is immense, and he can use something else to get around that problem, using his own lifespan to be able to wield that artifact. The fire began to consume all those undead creatures. Our protagonist still imagines that all of this is part of the dragon's trial, and now he charges at the creature made of bones, certain that the answer will soon be found. He had already noticed once that the creature's skull had an object embedded in it, and it certainly shouldn't be there. Knowing that the object must be related to the solution to this whole problem, our protagonist managed to climb onto the dragon's head, and that spear is the key to everything. It may be that he doesn't have the right answer, and that it's all just a meaningless game. He has nothing left to lose since his death is certain. But he wouldn't back down under any circumstance, because he's a Melvinger. Completely surrounded by the creatures, he grabs the shaft of that spear. Unexpectedly, a strong blue light began to manifest. The boy found himself in another place. Everything happened too fast, and he doesn't know what really happened. Because now in front of him, the dragon seems to be alive, and there is also a mysterious figure. The dragon's head shines as if it were made of crystal. Meanwhile, that mysterious figure remains still, until it turned to look more closely at our protagonist. The boy is increasingly stunned because that figure turned just to see him. Meanwhile, the white dragon with blue eyes was ready to unleash another barrage of attacks. In the palm of that mysterious man's hand, a ball of energy was formed. The power he manifested was truly intense. Our protagonist realized that the amount of mana was surreal. He must be in the 8th circle of the stage. Then those two monstrosities began to fight each other. Seeing all of that, the boy was sure of one thing. That mysterious man was even stronger than he had imagined. The place begins to fall apart due to the duel fought between the two. That horned man doesn't seem intimidated, even knowing his opponent is a dragon, showing him that his power is also truly impressive, managing to carve his spear into the creature's skull. That is the same instrument that was embedded in the bone dragon from the cave. Now our protagonist knows who was responsible for defeating the dragon. The horned man looks at our protagonist and says that he will be the one responsible for freeing him from that cursed place, because his body will be used as a vessel for this. Now they should become one, so they could dominate the human world. Before our protagonist could respond, he noticed that things weren't over yet. From the dragon's mouth, magical chains began to emerge. They started to bind the body of that man, whom the dragon called Mephistopheles the Demon King. The dragon's final act is to ensure that his executioner is buried there with him. Our boy finally realized what had truly happened. The Demon King said he was sealed with that dragon 1,000 years ago, but this time would be different, because a great vessel had appeared before him, and he wouldn't let this opportunity go unnoticed. Our boy began to be swallowed by darkness. He couldn't do anything about it. Everything he had gone through in the cave until now was not the test of a dragon, the trap of a demon king. And the boy began to wonder if he would die there in that way. The darkness was so intense that he could feel the pressure in every one of his bones. The demon king is pleased with what he sees because the dragon's mana is making his vessel increasingly powerful. All our protagonist can do now is agonize, and he began to remember that his ancestors, his family, sacrificed their lives to expel the demons during the Great War. Soon after, he found himself completely abandoned by the other noble families. Even the person he trusted most during that time tried to take everything that was theirs. Our protagonist is remembering these things while his body is being oppressed by darkness, and when a boy tried to protect the only thing he had left, he and his sister were completely abandoned. Remembering these things makes the agony in his body mix with the hatred in his heart. Everyone was insulting or betraying his family. Being just a child, there was little or almost nothing he could do, until there was nothing left. He lived until now, trying his best to cure his mana block, trying to rebuild his family's name. And one day he would make all those people who abandoned them deeply regret it. The artifact he carried on his chest began to shine. Our protagonist would not be devoured by a demon. A mysterious energy enveloped the boy's entire body, suppressing that darkness. It had dissipated immediately. That abrupt power left the demon quite confused. That was so powerful that the demon king, beyond confused, began to look surprised. Our protagonist made just a small movement with his hands, and the entire body of the demon king began to be sucked in. The preparations had been fulfilled and the first demon was about to be swallowed. Those shadows were gathering in the hand of our protagonist, to the despair of the Demon King, who realized that his life was being drained by the one who was supposed to be his vessel. Cries of desperation from the demon began to echo, until all the energy had already been absorbed. As a result, a marking appeared on the boy's arm. The boy is looking at his hands, and they shine as if made of light. Looking to the horizon, he can't tell where he is. But there was someone there with him, and he asked who that person was. They said they are just scholars seeking the pinnacle of magic. That voice was very familiar to him. And it continued, saying that because they were always chasing even greater power, they ended up being corrupted by demons that brought danger to this world. As soon as they realized the magnitude of their mistakes, they knew it was necessary to atone for their sins. They created a family in this world. The boy looked in awe at that grotesque figure. That was no ordinary demon king. That was the demon god. And the purpose of that family was to eradicate demons at the root. And that is exactly what they have been doing throughout history. But their work faced a constant problem. Demons never stop appearing. No matter what they do, they always reemerge from the darkness. That's why they need to keep devouring demons, so they can fulfill their purpose. The hands began to move, and with them, the earth began to tremble as well. Each gesture of those fingers carried meaning. The demons realized that even though that figure was small, it was extremely dangerous, and they launched an attack. Maybe someday in the future, the descendants of that family will be able to fully inherit its will. After that, several lights appeared, until only a pair of glowing eyes remained. The gigantic hand advanced toward that figure of light, releasing great power. Our protagonist rose up desperately, thinking that hand was going to hit someone, only to realize that he was no longer in the heart of that cave. Now he was in a place with windows. Assuming he had just had a nightmare, he began to collect himself, noticing that next to his bed was Scene. The first thing he asked was whether his friend had been crying, but the boy said he would never do that. The truth is, he really had been crying and was upset that the boy had woken up just now. Our protagonist tried to smooth things over, saying it's normal to cry, and if he remembers correctly, his friend was also crying inside the cave. Those words left Scene quite annoyed. Since he doesn't remember what happened, our protagonist asked if Scene had brought the rescue team to save him, and that's exactly what he did. But our protagonist wished Scene would use his magic to finish healing his wounds and said he should be more useful. Once again, he deeply irritated the boy with that kind of comment. In any case, Scene had a very serious message to give to our protagonist about doing dangerous things, and told him to get up immediately. Noticing that the boy had grown a bit taller, he even asked him to look at himself in the mirror to confirm that as well. Little by little, the memories are returning and our protagonist began to wonder if he really had changed. That made his friend suspicious. He knows something happened in the dragon's nest, and he also wants to know what happened to that bone dragon. Unfortunately, our protagonist can't tell him yet, but said he would explain everything when the time was right. Scene understood those words, hoping his friend would reveal the truth soon. Also not hiding that he's very upset that this petulant boy is hiding things from his only friend. Now it's our protagonist's turn to ask questions because he doesn't know what happened inside the dragon's nest. Scene's family is supervising the place, and our protagonist quickly realized they would have a lot of work with excavations. His friend confirmed that's not what's happening. Actually, they're keeping vigil at the cave so no one can enter. Since it belongs to our protagonist and he was the one who discovered it, others can't do whatever they want. According to the laws of that place, a dragon's nest belongs to the person who discovered it, but it's common for universities to obtain rights to excavate those locations. And at the moment, the Magic Tower and the Academy are disputing those rights. Seeing that the protagonist's expression had changed a lot, Scene asked very worriedly what he was thinking about. All the boy wanted was to thank his friend, because he is sure that Scene's family also wanted excavation rights, but gave them up because of our protagonist. But for the relationship they have, that's nothing. The two are truly great friends. And the protagonist quickly remembered something even worse. The bald fat guy is probably doing everything he can to gain rights over the dragon's nest as well. Because our protagonist hasn't forgotten that within that expedition, there were people hired to take his life. Scene became very worried because when he saw the protagonist's expression, he knew for sure that he must have planned something absurd, and he asked him not to even try putting it into action. But our protagonist had already made the first move. He had a small favor to ask, that rumors be spread saying he was seriously injured. A very well-dressed man is walking through the hospital corridors. Several other men dressed similarly are standing at the gates of the Imperial Magical Hospital. The fat guy was already there and asked the man to say that again. So he said that Elric is in a coma due to his severe injuries and he would like all of them to leave that place. But the fat guy didn't want to leave empty-handed. The others with him are also interested in excavation rights because the nest couldn't be left alone. They are very angry that the men from the Narester family, the well-dressed ones, are blocking access to the hospital. Meanwhile, our protagonist is watching from his bedroom window, seeing those idiots try and get in. The family spokesperson had gone up to our protagonist's suite, asking him to continue resting. But the boy stood firmly by the window. He kept watching the outside, until he took a deep breath, thinking about what he should do. He wants to know how long he will keep being watched without anything being said. He wants to know how long this will last. Mephisto said he should be a little more cordial with the king standing before him. Also known as Mephistopheles, he was responsible for bringing a great deal of chaos and danger to the human world. But now he's just an ethereal figure. Our protagonist thinks he'll call him Fisto. The Demon King was extremely outraged by the new nickname. He tried to hit the boy's back several times, while our protagonist thought that was the worst massage he's ever received. Our protagonist remains deep in thought. He placed one of his hands on his own chest. Definitely, everything in his head wasn't the product of his imagination. The heart of the dragon is the source of the dragon's authority, and that dragon was defeated by the Demon King, but it seems the dragon's heart entered our protagonist's body because he's feeling something different. But his memories only go up to the moment when the Demon King tried to take possession of his body. That's why he'd like the Demon King to say something. Even so, Mephisto remains quite irritated. In ancient times, when the gods ruled the world, the demon god had 4 servants. Phanes was one of them and represented the end itself. Incenare was the envoy of madness. Fornications, as the name suggests, was the militant of that good thing before marriage. And finally, the original sin, Mephisto, who is also the most powerful demon king of the legends. Now this creature of magnificent power is completely bound to our protagonist, which makes him even more irritated, because his will is to tear the protagonist's body into little pieces, but the boy is already annoyed by all that fuss, and asked if demons are always this stupid, since he had asked him to stop. The Demon King is furious because he waited 1,000 years only to have his mana stolen by someone like this person. His purpose was to put the entire world beneath his feet. That was the sole meaning of his entire existence. Unfortunately, things turned out differently, because he ended up encountering the King of Dragons. The two had a great battle, and meeting that creature changed the demon's path forever, because after being defeated, he made one last move, casting chains over Mephisto's body, causing him to also be buried in that place. The Demon King, who didn't expect that, was absolutely enraged, remaining in that prison for 1,000 long years waiting patiently, until one day it seemed his waiting had finally come to an end. A group of people was entering that cave, and among them was the person who would free him from the entire curse of being imprisoned. The ideal vessel is the one who will surpass all the tests placed by Remo, and he almost managed to take control of his body and soul. But all his plans were completely subdued. Now all he has are fragments of his energy and of his own existence. And the Demon King can't tell the nature of that power that almost absorbed him completely. Our protagonist told him to stop trying to act like the final boss already. After hearing that comment, the Demon King became furious and started cursing the boy, who completely ignored him, because he was too entertained looking at his own amulet, remembering words he had heard, that the descendants in the distant future would inherit that will. Maybe the voice he heard belonged to his grandfather. Another part he remembered was also about the demon's absorption, so he began to wonder if maybe he had absorbed all that power. That medallion is a tool with a very specific purpose. It was made to devour demons. Thinking about all this, our boy began to reflect more deeply. Maybe it's possible to devour other demons like Mephisto, and remembering the words he heard in the dream, there will be other demons too. But that made our boy even more excited. His joy is so genuinely concerning that even the Demon King started to feel fear. But before that, he had a task to handle. The demon wants to know what they are doing there, and our boy told the chatty ghost to shut up. Before learning to use the medallion, there's something he needs to confirm. The boy sat down and began to meditate deeply. He had tried to do that many times before without any success. Until this time, he managed to feel the energy flowing through his entire body. His perception was so heightened that he could observe tiny objects, and thus he approached a ladybug until it landed on a rose, feeling the petals come off from the force of the wind as they floated weightlessly through the air. Now he can feel all these things, not just the ladybug, but the softness of the breeze and the fragrances in the air. He can feel everything. And if his suspicions are correct, now this will be possible too. Our protagonist began to slowly close his hand, feeling that his heart was overflowing with energy. He gave a small command to his finger to ignite. A great explosion of energy happened right after that command. Even the demon was impressed by that display of power, because that wasn't just any kind of power. It was dragon magic, and it's impossible for a human to be capable of that. Even if he belongs to the Melvinger family, it's still quite outrageous. The boy looks up into the air, observing what he had just done, until he started to smile with joy. Now he can use magic too. After a long time, he finally managed to overcome his condition. All those words that he was a disgrace to his family's legacy now mean nothing. Now our protagonist can continue his journey in search of revenge, because there is a long list of people who will regret having ignored him. Outside, several reporters are taking pictures. They want to know about the health condition of our protagonist and what will happen with the excavations at the dragon's nest. The spokesperson said that further clarification would be given soon by the magic tower itself. After that interaction with the reporters, he returned to his master, pleading that he doesn't have to do that again. Even so, Scene is very grateful for the work he did. The family spokesperson is already somewhat used to the incidents caused by his master when he is in the company of our protagonist. But that situation is risky. If the imperial family or the magic tower finds out that the rumor is not true, there will be consequences. Scene is blindly trusting his friend's plan, so he decided he will believe in him. The greater the risks, the greater the rewards will be. But this situation is quite worrying for him, and Scene is already starting to regret being the protagonist's friend. The butler noticed the boy was missing and was informed that our protagonist had gone out for a walk. He left only a note saying he was going out, but his friend was worried. Even though he's not in a coma, his body is still recovering. He found that note quite strange. After seeing the note, he wanted to point something out to his master, because there's a small problem with it. The boy asked what that problem would be, and the butler was still staring at that sealed envelope until someone suddenly entered the room. It was Sheen's sister, who wants to know what he's planning without telling her. As she approaches him, she starts asking why the boy looks so surprised. The sister of our protagonist's best friend is known as the Firebird Witch, Tasha Nerister, and she really is very beautiful. This generation produced some geniuses, and among them, 3 stand out significantly. They are the new stars. And it seems that Fire Witch is one of those people. She was the youngest in all of history to obtain the title of Great Mage. Scene began asking about the reasons that brought her there. She heard that his friend was sick, so she decided to stop by, but she already knows the boy isn't in his room. Scene realized he'll be in serious trouble if she finds out what's going on. And since she notices things very quickly, he needs to handle this fast and said our protagonist isn't fit to receive visitors. But she doesn't seem to believe those words. He told the girl to leave and not cause trouble for the doctors, but she didn't like that, asking if he was really trying to give her an order. And she wanted to get straight to the point, asking what's going to happen with the excavation rites. Another thing about the Fire Witch is that she is completely obsessed with dragons. She wants to confirm that the excavation rites haven't yet been claimed by anyone. Scene started stuttering as he tried to answer, saying that the one responsible for deciding that is Elric himself. Not satisfied with the answer, she said she would have to take more drastic measures. She started squeezing her brother's arm but quickly let go, and said they should contact her as soon as Elric decides to wake up, but made it clear that if they didn't contact her before anyone else, she would give her little brother a generous beating. Knowing that threat would certainly be carried out, Scene intensely wished that our protagonist would do something. While he was distracted by his sister, the butler addressed him. In a completely disheveled state, he asked if they had just finished talking. The rumor that the heir of a prestigious family is in a coma had already spread. The newspapers are being sold all over the city. Everyone wants to know who will be the ones to explore the dragon's nest. Our protagonist is hidden under a hood, and he realized that his friend is handling this matter very well. Grabbing one of the newspapers, he saw that the bald fat guy was on the cover of one of them. Our protagonist knows he should keep smiling while he still can, because what he did will not go unpunished. One of the students went to the headmaster saying he would finally be able to do whatever he wants, but he shouldn't get ahead of himself since the election hadn't even started. The student with glasses said it wasn't his intention to be hasty, but he believes the fat man is the future of the academy. With a malicious smile on his face, the fat man said he isn't the future yet, but soon he will be. He asked about the most recent news regarding our protagonist and was told that he is fighting for his life, something that doesn't make him sad, quite the opposite. If the boy were to wake up, it would be a huge problem, and the student suggested hiring mercenaries. But the fat man told him to stop with those suggestions, releasing all the power of his aura. The boy became so terrified that he apologized for it. The fat man said that soon there would be a position available for a professor, and he's starting to think about who might fill that role. But since he's only the headmaster, he doesn't know everything that goes on at the academy. Realizing what he meant by those words, the student said he wouldn't disappoint him. The fat man calmly drinks his tea while imagining his plans coming true. Our protagonist was able to walk a lot through the city, and night had fallen upon it. Now he can act with a little more freedom, and his time to act has come. With his eyes, he can see the other side of the world. He just needs to find the secret spot and place the dragon's hand on it. Immediately, a great reaction began to occur. The energy was so great that it pushed our protagonist's body away. He found himself thrown far into the distance. As that brief interaction caused a great explosion, he is able to use magic without the need to chant complex incantations. Our protagonist catches his breath a little. Because he's finally at the starting point he wanted, he's going to make the world know about the rebirth of his family. He needs to become even stronger before the Academy's headmaster election. To the demon, our protagonist's performance with magic is pathetic, even though he can use the power that once belonged to him. Our protagonist agrees with that because he needs to get much faster and stronger. Seeing that the boy had his eyes closed, the demon became deeply irritated, for in his days of glory, no one dared to ignore him. There is something called the language of the soul, which exists in dragon magic. First, he needs to imagine something and link that image to words that already exist. Thus, our protagonist began to form something more complex, beginning to activate a new kind of magic, leaving the demon quite surprised. Once the power was circulating through his body, he commanded it to rise. Gradually, his feet began to lift off the ground. Seeing what was happening, the demon was truly impressed, for the boy was now able to use complex magic with ease. His eyes continued to shine intensely with the same green hue. He advanced through the city as if there were no limits to his movement, until he managed to behold the city from a very high place where all its lights could be seen. Only then did he realize he was too high, and that small test could be very risky. Even so, it was phenomenal. Though simple, he had managed to channel a lot of power, and he decided that he would keep trying. Soon the boy was flying through the sky with considerable control, while being followed by the demon. Although proud, he was impressed that a human child was capable of using the soul language in a double enchantment. He truly belonged to the family of the demon's natural enemies, and among all those he had met in his life, he had never encountered anyone so talented. In fact, there was only one person who could be placed on the same level, the one who played many demons, the firstborn of that notorious family. Soon the demon returned to his usual thoughts, for he did not want to remember that. His goal now was to stop the boy from continuing to grow, and he needed to take control of his body immediately, so he had to think of a way to make that a reality. But the boy's development was incredible, and he was already using the soul language fluently, even if it was still a bit laborious. To become stronger, he needed to learn how to use dragon magic and also needed a teacher who could keep it secret. The academy was completely infiltrated by Fatso's informants, and there was no one there capable of teaching him. Our boy finally returned to the ground. The teacher he needed had to be at least at the hexagram level, and someone like that would not accept him as a disciple. It would be much easier if his grandfather were still alive, or at least any member of his family. While immersed in his own thoughts, the boy noticed that the demon was also deep in thought. He decided to approach him to ask something, because he wanted to know if Mephisto could be his new magic teacher, and realistically, there was no better alternative. The demon's first reaction was to think that all of this was utter foolishness, so he turned his back to the boy to hide his true reaction. This was also a great opportunity for him, and showing some disinterest, he asked our protagonist what he would gain from these lessons. The boy promised he would create a new body for him through alchemy. The demon greatly doubted the human could do that, but for our protagonist, it was just a matter of becoming even stronger. For the demon, that still wasn't enough, and the boy said once again that he needed to become stronger, and that this would also benefit the demon. But if the problem was something else, he could propose a condition himself. And without thinking twice, Mephisto rejected the proposal, since he had no interest in passing on his knowledge unless, of course, the boy became dependent on him. Seeing our protagonist's reaction, he enjoyed witnessing his uncertainty, for he did not want to be used as a tool by the human. He was still too weak to take control of that body, but if he'd included black magic in the teachings, he might be able to achieve his goal. Eventually, the boy would become even stronger and the black magic would become deeply embedded in his soul. He waited eagerly for the boy to fall to his knees and beg to be his disciple. But the demon's plans were frustrated, as our protagonist would never accept that. With more serious words, he said there was a strict limit to the demon's bargaining power, who was already feeling completely humiliated. Our protagonist emphasized that if he kept playing hard to get, he would end up with absolutely nothing. So it would be wise for him to start thinking about being a bit more flexible. In the hands of that boy, the demon felt like a tool being manipulated. The situation was utterly hateful, and he tried to launch an attack. But using dragon magic, our protagonist commanded him to shut his mouth. Immediately, a seal appeared on the demon's lips, preventing him from saying anything. Seeing the result of his actions, the boy realized that it had gone better than planned. The demon struggled to try and say a few more things, but no sound came out of his mouth. The truth is, he couldn't believe he had been suppressed in such a way, and to his displeasure, our protagonist commanded him to act cutely. Not only had the demon's appearance changed, but he became slightly more charismatic. The result was so bizarre that our protagonist didn't die of regret only because regret doesn't kill, but if it did, the story would end here. It was so intense for him that he had to vomit immediately. Just remembering the image he had just seen, our protagonist felt genuinely disgusted. The revulsion was so great that he simply handed a notebook to the demon. If he changed his mind, he should begin writing the teachings there. Until then, he would remain with his mouth sealed, but the demon refused to cooperate, having already endured being sealed for 1,000 years. Our protagonist trained until nightfall, while the demon remained outraged. The next day, he continued practicing, and the demon was already anxious for the boy to ask him for some guidance. Thus, the days went by, and the demon's anxiety only grew in a way even he hadn't expected. The demon was already completely exhausted and decided it would be better to accept that he had lost. He began writing the notebook while struggling to accept his own defeat. What made it worse was our protagonist observing everything with a very smug expression, which made the Demon King feel an immense rage, because he could not accept having bowed to a mere human. But as soon as he handed over the notes, he began to behave like a very obedient dog. That was the basics of the language of the soul, and it couldn't be found in just any book. Seeing that the demon had cooperated, the boy made his appearance return to normal, but there was some information in the book that he wished could be written in more detail, and if so, he would consider letting him speak again. Any and all interaction between the demon and the boy filled him with hatred. As the days passed, the boy said the demon needed to write more than he did the day before. But that wasn't something that pleased him. To get more out of the demon, he started negotiating the release of the seal so he could speak for a few days. He also emphasized that his handwriting should be better, suggesting he should write everything all at once. But the more the boy spoke, the more the Demon King grew irritated, because the black magic hidden within those teachings would completely destroy his soul. Either way, our protagonist managed to learn the basics, and that already held overwhelming power. And seeing the boys practice, a demon king couldn't understand why the black magic had not yet manifested. Our protagonist noticed that the demon was too intrigued, so he asked if the surprise was because nothing had happened, and that's why he was so confused. Realizing he had been accused of something, the demon played dumb, but our protagonist said he analyzed everything he had written. Even so, thanks to the demon, he had reached a completely different level, and he was grateful for that. Only the Demon King hadn't imagined that the boy was seeing through all of his actions. It was so bizarre that he even said the boy lacked humanity, while our protagonist simply wanted to keep learning. And he said he would make him mute again, to which the Demon King responded by saying he had no knowledge left. Of all the time they had spent together, that was the statement that surprised him the most. Aside from the true speech technique of the Demon King himself, there was nothing else he could teach for now. That made the boy think deeply, because the true speech technique is only below divine speech. The demon said that at the boy's current level, he wasn't capable of learning it and would end up going completely insane. The worst part was that our protagonist knew it was true, and the Demon King continued, stating that magic can only be perfected on the battlefield. Because that is exactly what the protagonist's family had been doing all these years. He had also heard that phrase from his own father. Their family fought demons to protect the continent. That was the family's motto and had been taught very early after the territory was ravaged by war. His father was not a man of many words as he was suffering from the traumatic effects left behind by war. As if he missed the days of glory alongside the protagonist's grandfather, his father remained seated, gazing into the horizon with a visibly lost expression. But our protagonist was a very energetic child and wanted to know when he would get to fight too, and if he could use cool spells. Faced with all of his enthusiasm, his father didn't know what to say either. Seeing his discomfort, his mother had to intervene and ask if the boy still remembered what he needed to do to become a powerful mage. The answer to that was simple but not pleasant. He had to study a lot. She said he couldn't just be a ridiculously strong mage like his father, and that before becoming notorious, his grandfather had been a great scholar. The protagonist's father was a little affected by those words, but his wife didn't back down, because that was her way of teaching their own children. And when she wasn't looking, the father made a point to reinforce the same principle: magic is perfected on the battlefield. But after doing that, he would completely disappear, out of fear of his own wife. The two were heading out, and the woman asked the children to keep studying, as she would check on everything later. Our protagonist wasn't a fan of studying and had to be dragged by his own sister. To his father, children should enjoy their childhood, even if studying was good, since study bears good fruit. But the mother feared her son would become spoiled. Such were the days in our protagonist's family. On a stormy and rainy night, the boy began to cry. His father's illness had worsened, and his mother collapsed shortly afterward. They shared the same vitality and passed away together. On his deathbed, the protagonist's father regretted having had that fate of involving someone as wonderful as his wife. But she had no regrets, because in his company she had a beautiful family and was happy every day. And it was thanks to them that they were able to raise their children too. With little strength, the woman asked if Hayes was there. As the eldest daughter, she was asked to take care of the boy, while their mother apologized. The same was done by the father, who blamed himself for the condition of his son's body. The little children tried to deal with their grief. It was hard for him to accept that he would no longer have his parents and that he would be alone. But he didn't know how he and his sister would continue living without the support of their parents. It was then that his face was touched by the dying hand of his own father, and he confessed to his son that he had been much happier in his company than on any day spent on the battlefield. It wasn't necessary for his son to become a mage, but he deeply wished that he could be happy with the people he loved. Those were the last words he said, and the boy realized that he was finally alone. What was before him was only a shell that once carried what had been his parents, a memory he would never be able to forget. Now that he's grown up, he doesn't agree with his father about not becoming a mage. He just needs to get stronger, and that's exactly what he's going to do now, so no one can ignore him again. Magic can only be perfected on the battlefield, and that's the kind of experience our protagonist is going to seek. He knows there's a forest nearby that's full of ghost-type monsters, a truly dangerous place. There's also a cave inhabited by goblins, but the creatures are far too numerous. Until he remembered that his father once said there were hideouts scattered across the continent that could be used. Fully determined, the boy told the demon that they were setting off, and they are heading directly to the habitat of the Yetis, because it is in that place that the boy will gather his battle experience. On the way there, he stopped at a small stream to take a bath. It would be very problematic if his true identity were discovered, so he needed to change his appearance. For that, he was going to use a bit of magic, and he ordered the water to cut his hair. Thus, after a long time, he finally managed to get a decent haircut. But his transformation wouldn't stop there. He still needed to change even more. Finally, he appeared to be a completely different person, and now he was ready to head to his destination. In the nearest town, everything was covered in snow. At the guide agency, he learned that a group was already about to leave that town. Almost no one goes to the Yeti lands as it's a very dangerous place, but even so, the group was on the other side of the room, because they were almost on their way there. They seemed very interested in this new travel companion. Our protagonist tried to analyze all of them quickly. That team was composed of 4 herbalists and 3 monster hunters. besides the fact that there are 5 people there who are hiding their energy. The little girl introduces herself to him, but she is far more verbose than any character that has appeared in this story. The demon feels like tearing her throat out, and our protagonist asked if he could buy a communication crystal. But in their village, that item wouldn't work. He could communicate through a pigeon or a telegram. That made the little one, apparently a boy, remember another story. But our protagonist already wanted to move on with the journey. Seeing that he was in a hurry, the small one said he would tell everything along the way, to the displeasure of our protagonist and King the Morning. The boy needs to contact his sister soon, or she will be very upset. They are already heading toward the highlands, and the boy hasn't stopped talking for even a minute. The Demon King found that place quite familiar, and the protagonist wanted to know if he had walked there before. For the Demon King, the answer was obvious, since the Yidis used to worship him, something that left our protagonist surprised. He thought they were just monsters and wasn't expecting them to have any kind of connection with demons. The Demon King said their former leader was a very good tool, and for that he received the favor of the demon god, even though his fate wasn't so good. Now our boy knows that these creatures also had a ruler. Looking over the plains, Mephisto said the grave of that old king should be around there. That surprised the boy, and he asked if the demon knew the location, but he didn't either, and it had likely already been looted. That could be a clue for him to find one of his family's hideouts. These hideouts were built by his ancestors so they could have refuge and protect the family's legacy. And when he became the head of the family, he should first go to the land of the Yidis, and there he should confirm the family legacy in his father's place, paying respect to his ancestors. Our protagonist has no idea what that could be, and began to wonder if he would learn a bit more about that pendant. The little boy continued telling stories about that place, but the Demon King's patience had already run out long ago, begging our boy to use the silence spell on the little one. And speaking of the creatures, our protagonist began to wonder why none of them had shown up yet. Finally, the little one said that the path ahead would become more complicated, so they should stop and have a meal before continuing. A campfire was lit between them, and the travelers began to sit, eat, and warm themselves. The boy started to observe those people more closely. His eyes remained very focused. That particular man was as powerful as a royal knight, and more of the travelers were gathering around that fire. It seemed they were unaware of the protagonist's presence, who began to suspect they might be there to carry out some sort of mission. Perhaps that hooded person was their leader, and she didn't seem particularly strong, until the hood was pulled to the side, leaving our protagonist astonished. Some of the other travelers also noticed it, and the girl had revealed her face, thanking them for sharing their fire with her. One of the travelers seemed to be a man of little class, and he asked why the girl was hiding such a beautiful face. Another agreed with those words as well. It didn't take long for the knight to draw his sword, putting it on a collision course with that man's face. Everything happened so fast that it almost went unnoticed by the others, and the man realized he was still alive, but only by the sheer will of someone else. The knight said he should pay with his life for the comment he had just made, but the woman told him not to raise his sword. Even our protagonist realized the foolishness of that pawn, casually flirting with a noblewoman. That unusual situation made him and the demon share a look. They were in that forest, but they needed to be very cautious. The knight was determined to cut off that man's head, but the woman insisted that he do nothing more. Now he had to hide his frustration, sheathing his blade again without it having tasted anyone's blood. After that intense interaction, someone shouted for everyone to start running. The knight still didn't know what was happening, just like those men hadn't realized it either. But the knight's reflexes were fast, and he was already prepared to defend himself, managing to block several attacks. The other people were also concerned about the sudden attack, as some of them were already pushing up daisies. The knight is now very agitated and ordered the rest to protect the lady. Immediately, the other guards began drawing their swords. That feeling is familiar. Our protagonist felt as if he were in the dragon's nest again, but he doesn't know why there are so many of them now. And he saw that from the sky, a large number of arrows was approaching. That volume of attack is truly dangerous. If he wants to get out of there alive, he'll have to act immediately. Using the magic he had learned, he would block the entire attack, forming a great magical barrier in front of himself. Even so, he began to worry about the safety of the others with him, realizing that the woman's soldiers were doing their job, but the other travelers were falling one after another. They were being slaughtered by that attack as if they were animals. Our protagonist and the Demon King immediately became focused, until an intense red light shone in the heart of the forest. The demon knows exactly which tribe this is. They are the idiots of the Crimson Eyes. Our protagonist remained engaged in his own protection and increased his power and perception, managing to identify something among the trees. Seeing that several creatures were approaching, those were furious and truly enormous monsters. In that number, it could be fatal. The knight gave the order to his subordinates to eliminate them all, but the creatures charged fiercely, showing that they had a notable physical superiority. Redvania realized that this first battle would be very difficult and that the boy was already frightened before even starting to fight. Our protagonist told him to shut up because it wasn't the time for that kind of talk. Even so, those knights were formidable, for there was one among them with great potential. Managing to cut the creatures with ease, our protagonist realized that it was aura usage. He wants to learn more about that, but this is not the right moment as they are the victims of a surprise attack. And there's another group of creatures waiting to ambush everyone, so they need to be very cautious and plan their moves. But everything could change if our protagonist acts first. He removed the transformation from his face and used armament magic. It was good that he had memorized that type of enchantment. The group of Yidis in the forest kept approaching. One of them noticed that strange figure, but it was already too late to do anything. Even though he wasn't sure his attack would be effective, he struck the creature with all his strength, and it was clearly enough to end its life without anesthesia. The brutal sight of seeing one of their own have its skull crushed left the other creatures frightened. Our protagonist's goal was to delay their advance. For that, he needed to keep attacking, using a great magic that blew everything into the air. Despite his efforts, it wasn't enough. Many monsters were still alive, so they needed to be burned. The fire spread through the snow, consuming the creature's flesh. With the ice around, our protagonist managed to create several blades, and now he had them aimed at the creatures that were still alive. Faced with those relentless attacks, the monsters remained afraid. While our boy ordered the blades to pierce those bodies, this fight had basically become a one-sided massacre. Wherever there was a living monster, there was our protagonist making it suffer. After that intense assault, he noticed only 2 creatures were left alive, but he wouldn't allow them to escape, using a spell on them to restrict their movements. After the intense battle, our protagonist realized that more amazing than him is only the one who likes this video, subscribes to the channel, and leaves a comment. And now he wanted to have a brief moment of conversation. Only then did he realize the demon still couldn't speak. After being released, he began to argue with the boy, but the boy hinted that he would silence him again, making the Demon King behave very properly, even if unwillingly. He needed him to be his interpreter for those creatures. He said he would spare them if they told him the location of their village, but the monsters didn't want to trust him. And Mephisto said that times like these benefit more from dialogue than blackmail. The boy was already in a hurry and asked the Demon King to hurry up, because it seemed like he was whispering something else to the creature that started to look at our protagonist with interest. Faced with that, the boy used magic to interpret those words and saw that they were plotting against him. Immediately, the Yeti stood up furiously, but that wouldn't take much effort from the boy. He only needed a single finger to defeat the creature. Even though it was easy, he was almost caught off guard, becoming extremely furious with the demon and the remaining creature. Truly irritated, he said they needed to keep talking. But this time, someone else ended up getting the short end of the stick in his place. He told the demon that all the good monsters are dying because of him. After having used so much power, he began to feel something different in his body. Until now, he could only use 3% of the total capacity of the dragon heart. If he tries to use more magic recklessly, his body could explode. Fighting like that frequently can be as dangerous as losing a battle, but the boy knows he can't back down now. If he gives up on his current progress, he won't be able to revive his family. Looking at the forest, he remembered something, because he wanted to know if that beautiful woman was still alive. Much blood continues to be spilled, and the knight is already panting after so much fighting. Apparently, he and his companions managed to defeat all the creatures. With the end of the combat, the woman expressed her concern since one person had disappeared. To the knight, that person must have flawed and died in the process or is hiding somewhere. But his words to the woman were that the person must have escaped safely, and she genuinely hopes that's what happened. But by the force of the plot, she is worried about someone she doesn't even know. Meanwhile, our protagonist faced other problems, because he needs to defeat other monsters to continue on his path. He proposed to them not to fight or just to go see the tribe chief. Even though he spoke in the creature's language, they remained very hostile, until a strong voice ordered all of them to step back. Apparently, the tribe chief was going to reveal himself to him. The boy was impressed by what was happening, since that creature was much bigger than the others, and said he had something to ask him, but the tribe leader didn't answer anything at all. The boy is ready to react, just hoping he won't have to use what he has stored. If the negotiation fails, he will have to take out the tribe chief, but the creature noticed that he has green eyes, and asked what the name of this visitor was. An unexpected question, but he said his name is Elric Melvinger. After a brief silence, the creature asked him to follow, so they walked through the snow while being followed by the others. The leader said that a legend is passed down in that tribe. A long time ago, there was a great king who ruled that entire mountain. Our protagonist soon realized it could be Mephisto's story, and the legend tells of a human who was recognized by the king as his friend. This person had very intense green eyes and carried the name Melvinger. The boy never imagined that one of his ancestors was a friend of the king of the Yidis. Since then, it carried the promise of preserving that human's home. Knowing this, the boy wants to know where this refuge is, and the creature said they are standing over it at that very moment, showing a huge hole in the middle of the ice. Looking into it is distressing, as nothing can be seen. Our protagonist has difficulty believing that inside that place there's a house, until he decided to use his senses to detect it, seeing that at the bottom of that abyss there really was a house. And that wasn't all. A great current of wind was coming out of it. Even the Yidis have trouble going down there because of that wind current. Mephisto warned that the boy would freeze to death if he tried to descend, and that with his current abilities, the journey would end fatally. The boy agrees that going down there is very reckless, but he also can't go back, and his ancestors wanted to see the skills that their descendants would have. Without thinking twice, the boy threw himself into that hole. because he needs to trust his ancestors. That was the peak of our protagonist's recklessness. Even Mephisto became worried. While in free fall, Elric realized it would be harder than he imagined. The demon appeared, reminding him that he must stay focused or he'll end up dead. Trying to focus, he knows he has to take it one step at a time, using magic to soften his fall. And the house was getting closer and closer, until he finally managed to land on something. The magic he had used created platforms to cushion his fall. I don't understand this. Chapters ago he was flying, and now he's doing this nonsense. Either way, he managed to reach the bottom safely. That had demanded a lot from his abilities. And the boy collapsed to the ground completely exhausted, thinking he was going to die. After recovering, he stood up with a mischievous smile on his face to Mephisto's astonishment. Even so, that place seems too ordinary. It's just a wooden cabin. He approached it to try to open the door, only to realize it was sealed with magic. That probably wasn't meant to be hard to open. Mephisto suggested he try inserting a password with mana. As he poured his mana into the seal, he said several words that could serve as a password. But that strategy didn't work. Perhaps he really needed a key, and only one object could meet those criteria. It was time to try opening the cabin with his amulet. The object was already pressed against the magical barrier. Immediately, a reaction began to happen, and the door that was once closed opened before him. The inside of that cabin looked nothing like what was seen from the outside. There were several books on the shelves. Checking some of them, the boy was impressed, because there was an enormous amount of knowledge there, which isn't easy to find. Mephisto assumed that this place must have been the refuge of the Sage of Winter. Seeing that he had piqued the boy's curiosity, he tried to remain silent. But the protagonist knew that this demon must know many stories and went back to being distracted by the books, until he found one that told the history of his entire family. So far, there was nothing new. Their family's job was to eradicate demons. It was exactly what he had heard in his dreams. But he came upon some words that spoke of the vessel and the requirements that must be met. His family received a divine task that must be fulfilled. He must be capable of digesting the demons he swallows. That will be able to produce a new form of magic. All that knowledge was entering the boy's mind. He needed to consume the demons. He needed to absorb their strength, and the amulet he carried began to shine. Until, after all that, the artifact seemed to have been completely renewed, releasing a very intense light. A message from his ancestors was being transmitted, because that was the beginning of his true journey. After that flash, the boy woke up in the middle of a flower field, not knowing where that place was. A voice said that he must be the descendant who inherited the will and task of the family. The man waited patiently for our protagonist to turn around to him. Then the boy began to do so, coming face to face with a man wearing a monocle. But he didn't know which ancestor this was. Until the man introduced himself, his name is Otto Merbinger. Their name had unfortunately changed in translation. He is responsible for testing the descendants of the family, a sort of guide. Centuries ago, the family was being established, and this man is one of the 5 most prominent ancestors. He was pleased that the boy seemed to know who he was. He immediately asked if he was the Sage of Winter. Otto said that few people knew that nickname and wanted to know where the boy heard it, and revealed that he learned it from Mephisto, but the demon had disappeared. Otto wanted to know if he was referring to the demon king of the original sin, and our protagonist confirmed. He hadn't expected the boy's first demon to be the one who devoured him, that he was truly an impressive descendant, and now he would have to increase the difficulty of his test. Meanwhile, outside, Mephisto wasn't enjoying being insulted at all, and our protagonist wanted to know what this test was and what exactly he would be guided through. Otto placed his hand on his head and recognized that the boy must have many questions, and one of them must be why everything was being made so difficult, since they could have just left behind objective information. Besides that, the boy was a little embarrassed. To respond to him, Otto began to gather magic in his hands. He said they were preparing something similar to a wheel, and once it starts turning, it can no longer be stopped. That's why they have to inspect all the descendants. This power cannot belong to just anyone. Since the boy has already passed, the choice is his. Whether he will continue turning the wheel or decide to stop it. That was a proposal that left our protagonist quite thoughtful. He doesn't know exactly what his family's purpose is, and if he decides to move forward without knowing what it is, his plans could be completely changed. And this is the last chance he will have. Otto said he would respect the boy's decision to revive the family. He would also do it to revive the dream of all his ancestors, carving his name into history as the greatest mage this land has ever seen, just as his grandfather once was, with even statues built in his memory. That had already been the dream of our protagonist for a long time, and now all that power is part of him too. Otto can't stop being impressed by what he's seeing from the boy, and he found it very interesting that the boy is so determined about his purpose, being overly enthusiastic to show it. Opening his hands, he began to change the entire place. Now our protagonist is surrounded by great icy mountains. Feeling a cold that hurts his bones, he asked what place that was, but his ancestors said it's where he will be tested, so he can receive his first assignment. But the cold is so intense, he never imagined he'd be tested in a place like that. Despite the hardships, this is a great opportunity for him to become even stronger. Seeing that the boy wouldn't stop smiling, Otto acknowledged that this optimism is perfect for new candidates. Now he should look further ahead, but the boy doesn't know where to look, especially since his ancestor said he should look deeply. So he began to focus his eyes, seeing a dense black mist. And in the middle of it, a figure was hidden, and it looked a lot like a demon. Intrigued by it, he asked what that could be. That is the king of the frozen mountain and the ruler of all the Yetis. He was also very ambitious and tried to restore the glory of his tribe, which had been usurped by demons. But in the end, he was swallowed by his own choices, becoming a demon himself. And that particular demon is the second one a protagonist must consume. The boy thought he would need to kill that thing, but his ancestors stated he needs to swallow it, which is different. From now on, he will have to consume demons to extract the seals within them, the root of the entire existence of the race. After accumulating so many negative emotions, a personality begins to form. That's what creates a demon. Each one of them has its own desires, and the heart where they live is what they call a seal, and the seal of original sin is Mephisto himself. Now our protagonist understands what that marking means. It's the seal of the demon king. He needs to hunt demons from now on to obtain those seals. This must be done by consuming these creatures. After that, he will also absorb all the abilities it had. Faced with this, our protagonist realized he could become powerful in a way he couldn't even imagine. But he will soon discover this in practice. Then he used flight magic to go toward the creature. And approaching it, he also used armament magic. It's not necessary for him to defeat the creature. He needs to consume it, but he doesn't know how that's going to happen. The blackened mist is really very dense. Feeling that mana, the demon knows it belongs to a descendant of the Mervinger, and it seems that Mephisto is also with him. Both demons begin to intimidate each other. That boy is basically the natural enemy of them all, and as he approached, he realized it wouldn't be easy. The demon's killing intent was truly immense. Our protagonist needs to be quick to dodge the attacks, because he was almost caught by the black mist. Finally beholding with his own eyes the great demon he needed to swallow, surrounded by its warriors. All of them are on a completely different level from the monsters he had faced so far. Especially the king, he was so intimidating that the boy wasn't sure he could defeat him. If he could use the seal he already possesses, he might have a chance, since Mephisto's power is immense. But since he doesn't know how to use that power, he needs to think of another strategy. Since that demon king won't give him any respite. As this is only a test, he began to think that using the power of the seal he already has might be considered cheating. But needing to act fast, he started to summon fire with his hands, causing a great explosion among the creatures. The fire was truly intense and brought a bit of warmth to that frozen desert. However, our protagonist's effort was not effective. His face was about to meet his sword in a very intimate way. Even with the explosion, the creatures managed to pass through the fire. Our protagonist had to act fast to stay alive, using powerful ice magic to suppress his enemies. That way he managed to take down those who had gotten too close. Despite being in danger, our protagonist has enormous determination and is much more dangerous than a mere demon. Once again, he and the king of the creatures begin to observe each other. As they were abandoned by the demons, they should already be aware of that truth, that when they are weak, they are abandoned. That is the reason that motivates our protagonist. He needs to become stronger and stronger. And if he manages to become stronger, that kind of test, he will end up crushing it as many times as necessary. And when he was about to be attacked by the creatures, he managed to create a huge and devastating fireball. His light was so intense that it began to consume those small demons, until his attack was stopped by the power of the Demon King. The blow was harsh. Our protagonist realized he is not invulnerable. His body was thrown across the frozen plain. That strike was truly capable of hurting him. And now that he is weakened and out of position, he had become far too easy a target. After finally hitting the ground, he began coughing as the impact forcefully expelled the air from his lungs. If he keeps going like this, he will end up being defeated by this demon. Only then did he remember that he could not fail that small test. He gathers his strength to get up, fully aware that his body still isn't able to handle all this power. But there's something worse than having your body explode. It's failing a family test. With his power restored, he vanished quickly, appearing in front of the Demon King. Our protagonist knows he needs to use more and more mana to defeat his enemy. The creature tried to slice him with the sword, but the boy managed to dodge the attack. Now is his chance. He's going to push the dragon heart to its limits, rushing past his enemy with great speed, leaving a massive wound on its body. The magic he used was severe, capable of freezing his enemy completely. But that had been exceptionally intense. The boy was witnessing his own limits, and had to sit down to catch his breath. For a brief moment, his face overflowed with joy, until he felt the exhaustion that followed. It almost didn't seem real. No matter how he wants to interpret this experience, it was far too intense. And now our protagonist feels like his heart is about to explode as the demons are appearing again. That black mist started to advance toward him. In a defensive stance, he tried to keep it away by stretching out his hand, until a blue glow emerged from the protagonist's body and began to manifest. It was the marking of his seal that had appeared. The dark mist was heading toward him as if being absorbed. Examining his own arm, he began to notice that the marking was changing and the mana from the dragon heart had stabilized. The seals are also the true names of the demons, and to use that power, it's necessary to know their names. Our protagonist was intrigued as he didn't know how to discover a demon's name, but his ancestor told him not to worry. When the right time comes, he will be able to feel it naturally. So he closed his eyes and began to concentrate. While forming magic with his hands, he realized that the true name of that demon was cruelty. While feeling the snow, he couldn't explain why he was able to know that name. The knowledge simply came over him through the absolute power, the power of the script. And now the boy knows how to use that seal. Once he knows the true name of that demon king, to use the power, he said his magic should be cold and heartless, and the ice magic he summoned proved to be incredibly destructive. The demons that had reappeared cannot advance, because if they are struck by that spell, they will need to rise once again. And a great icy explosion happened across those plains. After that, the protagonist's body was weakened. The mana consumption was far too intense for him. Even so, he had succeeded, and now he has a small notion of what the power of a seal is, since he had devastated much of that place, leaving a large marking on the ground. The boy realized that only a few enemies remained to be defeated. But before he could do anything, his body decided it was time to stop. As his consciousness begins to fade, he tries to understand what happened. The boy woke up abruptly from that living and real nightmare, needing to bring his hand to his throat to realize he was alive. His body tried to lift off the ground, but the experience had been far too intense. The memories he has in his mind are downright disturbing. Mephisto appears to make a joke, saying that our boy had just gone through a great ordeal. He was already expecting the assignments to be triggered, since the boy lost consciousness and the medallion became very agitated. Immediately he remembered what he had gone through, confirming that his death wasn't real. It had only been a very intense dream. He was reckless for trusting too much in the power of the seal and must have passed out after consuming all his mana. Despite that, he has to acknowledge that that power is much greater than he imagined. If the incomplete seal of cruelty holds this much power, he can't imagine how far the one original sin goes. Looking more closely at the boy, Mephisto identified the seal of cruelty, saying that the Sage of Winter has very bizarre schemes. Taking advantage of the fact that the demon is talking too much, our boy asked how to use the power of the original sin. Mephisto assumes the boy must already know the truth about names. Even so, he wouldn't give that information so easily. No matter what kind of humiliation he suffers at the hands of the boy, he would never reveal his name. But the protagonist had only asked a question. He wasn't even expecting such a serious reaction. In his optimism, he thought he would hear the name, but now realizes that the seal is everything a demon has. If Mephisto allowed the seal to be used, it would be like losing everything he possesses in life. Feeling a bit of empathy, our protagonist decided he won't insist for now. The seal of original sin is the seal of a demon king, and imagining the size of its power, the boy is sure he won't be able to handle it. After these thoughts, he asked if the demon really knew the king of the mountain. Mephisto found it strange that they were changing the subject until our protagonist said that place is the grave of that king and his task is to capture him. Mephisto was impressed by the size of Otto's madness, making the boy capture such an entity. Since the task is underway, the boy wants to know if the demon can suggest some method. Nothing comes to his mind, but assuming the demon must know something, the boy keeps insisting. The demon doesn't want to reveal the secret of the seal, as that would be betraying his own race. Then the protagonist said he'd give him 3 days without cute transformations. Even recognizing it as a good offer, the demon said his pride wouldn't be bent. Until our protagonist went all in, raising the offer to 5 days. The demon started to feel tempted, but faced with his indecision, the boy withdrew the offer, making the demon immediately backtrack, accepting that generous gesture. Impressive that he was convinced so quickly. Mephisto said he'd be direct. With the protagonist's current seal, he won't be able to complete this task. But there is a way to make it work. Revealing a mischievous smile, the demon began to think. Outside, the boy starts to feel very cold. That's the reason he didn't want to go out. However, he needs to put the demon's tips into practice and began to move through the snow. He needs to increase his achievements so he can level up, since the seals can be ranked as common, advanced, precious, unique, and mythical. The seal of cruelty is at the precious level, but our protagonist's achievement level is only 1 star. For comparison, the seal level of the King of the Mountain is 10 stars. Either the boy increases his own level or he ranks up to the unique level. Knowing these things, he seems much more motivated, since now he has hope of winning this. His feet keep moving through the cold snow. He had finally found the lord of that mountain. No matter how many warriors he has defeated, the boy still has 2 stars, finding himself forced to face the king of the mountain. But he was very impressed. What he saw was not just a shadow, but all the condensed demonic energy. Remembering his ancestor, he doesn't know if he's a friend for teaching or an enemy for assigning such absurd tasks. The wind keeps blowing cold, and our protagonist has to at least try. He's sure it won't be easy at all, but also confident that his victory will come if he persists long enough. Only Mephisto had an unexpected reaction. The same happened with the boy. He had returned to the room because he was defeated without lifting a single finger, having no idea how to beat that creature. The demon suggested he give up, while the boy considers other alternatives to obtain the seal. Maybe he should extort someone. He immediately started eyeing the demon king, who felt terrifying chills all over his body. Remembering a detail about the creature, he asked the demon if the king of that mountain is actually a woman. He looked very closely at his companion. while Mephisto took a while to answer. When he was about to say something, he noticed the boy's expression. That look was making him feel very uncomfortable, thinking our protagonist sees him as some kind of deviant. Because of that unexpected reaction, the boy realized there's some very relevant information between those two demons. In time, he will find that out. The most important thing now is to swallow the king of the mountain, even if he has no idea how to do it. One thing he's certain of is going to be by force. With his conviction renewed, the boy set off toward his goal, being immediately captured by a freezing barrage. That was enough to make his body freeze. A cold so intense, it could produce the worst kind of pain. Determination alone is not enough. The boy ended up being defeated several times, until after so many attempts, his results began to change. This time, he managed to land an attack before dying. Little by little, he is getting closer and closer to that demon, close enough to glimpse part of its face. He can see it clearly, and his mastery over the seal of cruelty is also improving, though it's still quite difficult. But the boy has no other choice. He needs to get better and better, and he was more than determined to surpass his own limits. The two managed to get quite close, their hands touching. Magical power began to surge. The power struggle was intense. Because of the seal, it was as if he had absorbed part of that power, being thrown far away as soon as the power struggle ended. While all this is happening, he continues to be observed by his ancestor. Ada recognizes that it wouldn't be surprising if the boy's ego shattered from losing like this. But it's impressive to see that he keeps smiling. Beyond talent, the boy possesses great willpower. A talent like his certainly won't appear again in the family, and this time the boy managed to cut off one of the demon's arms. The limb flew through the air, spilling plenty of blood, until it was undone, turning back into demonic energy, which was promptly absorbed by the seal on our protagonist's arm. After all his attempts, he managed to rise to 3 stars. But his moment of admiration was short. The demon had not stopped attacking. Luckily, he reacted quickly enough not to be hit. The battle is so intense that he has no time to be distracted. His enemy is showing great skill in the fight, and this time will show him an attack that hasn't been used yet. Our protagonist immediately creates his shield barrier, worried about what's coming. His defense proved ineffective, being completely obliterated by the creature's strike. He realized he's once again at his limit. Even absorbing that energy wasn't enough. To defeat the king of that mountain, he needs to understand how the creature thinks. But perhaps not even that would be enough. He decided he needs to become the king of the mountain to win that fight. As he drew near, the seal on his arm began to shine intensely. The boy was immediately surprised. He didn't know what was happening and began to wonder if he had died again. Mephisto had appeared before him, asking the boy to prove himself. The boy didn't understand at first, but he paid attention to the demon's words, who said he needed to show he was worthy of belonging to their race. Those words were directed at the king of the mountain. In the vision he was having, our protagonist had become the king of the mountain. On one of his arms there was a marking similar to his seal, and it began to glow very intensely. His eyes began to open slowly, seeing that someone was waiting for this. It seems the demon was watching our protagonist and still doesn't know what's happening. In these memories, it was revealed that the demon god had sent an oracle to them, and everyone hailed the presence of the queen of those lands. A small bear was being presented to this woman, and now that entire region belonged to them. While watching all those images, the boy wondered if they were visions of the past. The king who united all those tribes was not satisfied with just that mountain. His greed had grown during the unification process, and he decided he would reclaim the glory his people once had, telling them all that they had once belonged to the mighty race of demons, and now they would return to their rightful place. Beyond their borders, they managed to make many humans and demons kneel before their power. The fury of those tribes was overwhelming, until they finally became part of the demons. Not satisfied with his royalty, the king of the mountain decided he would become a demon king as well. But his plans encountered a major obstacle, and the king came face to face with the original sin. The wall it represented was simply insurmountable. There was no other choice for the king of the mountain but to accept the bitter taste of his own defeat. Even so, he decided he wouldn't stop, as he wanted to further perfect his seal. And he took the first step toward an even greater path. He was almost being recognized by that demon king. But once again, his plans met with great resistance. Powerful knights had appeared in his path, a barrier far greater than the one represented by the demon king. There was no comparison to anything he had seen until now. Faced with those people, the king would not back down, ordering all of his troops to advance. A bloody battle had begun, and his attacking forces were being decimated. Looking at all that carnage, the king of the mountain could not understand. Those humans were endowed with tremendous strength, capable of bringing chaos to her entire army. Desperate screams of her subordinates began to fill the entire battlefield. They did not want to die in that place, and a great creature had appeared, so terrifying that even the king of the mountain wished to go on living. Before the power of that enemy, her army was made of ants. There was little her soldiers could continue doing. Even so, the king remained with the axe in hand, but her hesitation was so great that her hands wouldn't stop trembling. She tried to calm her men, saying they belonged to the proud race of demons and that they should bring terror to their enemies. But that speech didn't stop the blood from flying through the air. She watched in disbelief at her complete helplessness. Her men had been devastated in the blink of an eye, leaving behind only empty shells. The one responsible for all of it was called Otto, our charismatic glasses-wearing user, the protagonist's ancestor. Her race lost that war and was forced to return to their frozen mountain. After that defeat, she had a long journey dealing with her own hatred. She told him that humans have everything they want and don't allow other creatures to have what they desire. While she shouted those words, her seal began to glow. The same glow now covering the protagonist's body, who could now see the king of the mountain clearly. All in a flash of memories made our protagonist perceive things differently. Now he understands what that entity's role was. There is no longer animosity from his side, and his enemy had also stopped attacking. Both share a similar story. They had to endure a lot. Hard times were abundant for them. What she wanted was to reclaim the glory of her race, a desire similar to his, who now feels great empathy for her. After that day, Otto remained on the frozen mountain, and after many battles against the king of the mountain, they ended up developing mutual respect and spent a lot of time together. Even so, that desire still remained in her heart. She was not able to master her own ambitions, becoming a monster in the end. Otto knew what had to be done, and by his hand she met her end. After witnessing all of this, our protagonist heard the voice of the king of the mountain, recognizing that he must be a descendant of that family, someone Otto had spoken about. For having managed to cut off one of her arms and absorb her mana, she realized he wasn't wrong to have taken him seriously. The boy apologized for the wound and she began to feel pain. That injury was causing severe problems. She said she ended up that way because she couldn't abandon her ambition, and even though she had been a king, she was also a warrior, and didn't want to receive pity from an enemy. The boy doesn't know what to say in this situation. She said that his battle had finally come to an end, and now she would honor the sacrifice of her people, because she regrets having been greedy enough to wish to become a demon. Being happy beside those she loved would have been a much better ending. The boy observes that even after that confession, she continues to be consumed by all that demonic energy, and he doesn't know what to do now. A great power began to manifest from her body. Only then did our protagonist realize he must defeat the king of the mountain, a creature who was able to unite all those tribes and the greatest warrior of her people. The enemy he must consume at all costs. For that, he will need to use all the power he has, thinking that it is the minimum way to show respect to that great warrior. And now he will show her the great duty that has been assigned to him. The stones begin to rise on the battlefield, and he was going to show the king of the mountain what he is capable of doing. The two are about to clash, bringing a conclusion to that entire story. As they approach each other, their energies begin to collide intensely. The axe charges forward dangerously once again, and the weapons strike each other brutally. The boy knows he needs to become that creature, rushing toward her with all the power he possesses. But the sensation he has while doing so is strange. His life is on the line in all of this, and the closer they get, the more dangerous it becomes. And he can't quite say why it's so fun. A massive impact happens after that reflection. The ice beneath his feet is shattered, sending debris flying. Finally, our protagonist can feel days filled with joy, which she can experience by Otto's side. All of this happens while they continue fighting. The king of the mountain is proving to be a formidable opponent, but the boy is now on equal footing, even if only temporarily. There is no truce between the two. They keep clashing tirelessly. The boy's eyes shine intensely, and the same happens with his opponent. Both are at their limit. As they charge once more, he's certain this blow will decide the winner, revealing the technique that brought several races to their knees, the secret art of the Frozen Mountain King. As she performs her movements, our protagonist begins replicating each one of them. Once again, their hands collide. This is the ice-breaking technique, a technique so devastating it began to destroy everything around them. In the midst of the dust, their silhouettes can be seen. They remain still, but it's impossible to tell what happened. Until finally it's clear that the boy's attack was far more effective, as he had destroyed a large part of the Mountain King's body. Aware of his own strength, the boy remained stunned. As he watched the entity's body begin to break apart, she was turning into a dark mist, and as she did, she started to smile. The result had finally come. Our protagonist doesn't seem very happy about it, and he began to strain to hold back his tears, only to hear a sincere thank you from his opponent. Finally able to see her true face, the fight had taken a great toll on the boy, and the creature fell to her knees as the sky opened above them. After all the effort he gave, he emerged victorious. Gradually, her body began to disappear, becoming pure demonic energy, which was completely absorbed by the seal our protagonist possesses. Now this tattoo bears a different design, showing the frozen mountain. At the end of the battle, plants began to sprout from the ground. The growth was so fast, they started to bloom right then and there. The boy's first task had been completed. Otto came to him to offer congratulations since the boy had swallowed the king of the mountain. Taking a deep breath, he told his ancestor that this first task had been very difficult. But Otto said that's the family standard, and he couldn't consider himself one of them if he wasn't able to do that. Even so, he didn't hide that he was surprised. He thought the boy would take 1 to 3 years, and he managed to do it all in just 1 month. After hearing that, the boy froze. While Otto confirmed, a month had passed. He immediately began doing the math. It took him 1 month to learn magic, and he spent another month in there. So that's 2 months. Seeing the boy's concern, Otto started laughing, thinking it was a joke, until he asked if this really wasn't a bad joke. Then he acknowledged he had a talent for spotting prodigies, and our boy remembered he always used to say that, which made his ancestor even more excited. As they stood side by side, Otto wanted to know how her final moments were. Our protagonist said she passed while smiling. Hearing those words brought great relief to his heart. Respectfully, the boy expressed his gratitude for everything he had received so far, and Otto wished him to be cautious upon his return. The boy said with a smile that he wouldn't be able to visit often. Otto understood, after all, the head of the family must be very busy. Finally, our protagonist returns to the main path of his life. Before leaving, he turned around, surprising Otto. Then the boy asked how he would get out of there. Otto extended his hand and said he had already left there many times. Without knowing what was happening, he was hit in the face by something, finally waking up on the outside. Still startled, he thought something had happened to his face, cursing his ancestor. The demon realized what had happened, while the boy complained that he should have at least been warned. Mephisto wants to know if he managed to swallow the king of the mountain, and the boy shows him this seal. Confidently, the demon believes all of this happened because of the help he gave, while our protagonist sarcastically agrees that yes, that's exactly what happened. But even a demon king knows he only gave superficial tips, and that boy isn't just a genius, he's actually a monster. Now that he's back, he has more questions for the demon about his relationship with the king of the mountain and why he prevented her from becoming a full demon. Mephisto started to feel embarrassed upon realizing that he knows these things, and the boy revealed that he took a peek into the memories of the king of the mountain. The demon said that back then he was very bored, and the king of the mountain was just a worthless part of the demon race. Until he heard of that woman's feats and decided to check for himself. She was far from becoming a demon king, but she had the ambition and the necessary skill. If she had encountered another demon king who wasn't benevolent, she would have been torn to pieces. Mephisto asked to be found again when she became stronger and left her behind. Our protagonist found that very anticlimactic and asked if he never saw her again. The demon king said he did me too. Then he started remembering a few things. Of that woman in the company of Otto. As he closed his lips, it was as if he felt great regret. And the boy seemed to understand what had happened. Mephisto doesn't know how to behave around women he likes and ended up being a jerk to her because his feelings weren't reciprocated. Mephisto was immediately affected by that comment, saying he wasn't in that situation. Now the boy understands why the demon has been single for 1,000 years, which makes Mephisto even more upset, since the boy started singing that he'll be single forever. Otto's hand remains clenched, still steaming. He was deeply impressed by the descendant he had found. His eyes closed and he began to search for memories in his mind. Bloodied hands are carrying a small child. The king of the mountain watches that lifeless body. That's not what she wanted to bring back to her own tribe. In the face of the grief she was showing, Otto began to approach her politely. His first impression was of being stared at with hateful eyes, until that gave way to endless mourning. Demonic energy began to spread everywhere. She was asking Otto for help. Her request was that he end her existence, but that's something he couldn't do. All he could use now were palliative techniques, which made her remain in that dimension all this time. Finally, the suffering of his friend had ended. Now she could rest in peace, and maybe one day they would meet again, and he hopes that truly happens. While he was hunched over the books, the demon asked what he was looking for, but that's something the boy needs to find on his own, until both saw something interesting. In the boy's hand was a small ice crystal. He received it from Otto to go meet the god of Camellia, as she would be his new guide. Asking if that would be his next task, Otto responded affirmatively. While examining the item, he didn't know how long he would have to keep doing these things. Otto replied that he would do so until he reached the level of their progenitor. Those words left our protagonist stunned. Knowing he had many questions, his ancestor said everything would be answered naturally. These tasks were planned so he could follow in his footsteps. The boy tried to hide that he was very anxious, while Otto apologized for placing such a burden on him. But only the head of the family can do this, and now the boy must depart, until he can refine his own winter. He told Mephisto what he needs to do now, and the demon began laughing uncontrollably. If it's to meet that god, he must be trying to create winter. Our boy wants to know if the demon understands what that means, and he said it's one of the seasons, which can torment even the demon kings. Realizing there was more information in that, the boy asked Mephisto to share more, but the entity didn't want to. He said he'd let the boy go 4 days without punishment, but the demon wasn't interested. Our protagonist hit his limit, saying he wouldn't silence his voice, but that was his final offer. That pleased the demon king a bit more, and he said that the progenitor of the Mervinger family had 4 aides. Each one was given the name of one of the seasons, which matched their personality traits. Otto is the one who corresponds to winter, and if someone like him stayed behind to guide his descendants, it means he wants to pass the power on. The boy realized that if he completed this, he might receive tasks from the other seasons. What if he could gain their power? He could be as powerful as the progenitor once was. So he needs to keep absorbing demons, increasing the number of seals he has. With great enthusiasm, he realized his dreams are coming closer to reality. He will be able to restore his family. Now he wants to know why that ice crystal is so important. the demon said, is the center of winter, and it is formed in the deepest part of the frozen mountains. Camellia is a flower that blooms in winter, and no vase would suit it better than the ice crystal. The boy wishes to find the goddess soon, and the demon warned that she can be found in the Temple of Flowers located to the north. This surprised our protagonist, as he thought the temple was a legend and the demon warned that the place is guarded. To further strengthen his certainty, he decided he will seek information from those books. But the real problem is that the demon is being too friendly. He might be plotting something. Moreover, his spiritual form is becoming more vivid. Mephisto knows the boy realized he has grown stronger and that he can't do anything about it either. All these tasks are making the boy stronger and stronger, and consequently, the demon becomes stronger too. This could be a process that will bring the Demon King back to his former glory, ready to devastate the world. Mephisto likes the look on the boy's face, imagining he must be terrified. Making the boy stronger is an idea that makes him uncomfortable, but for his recovery to happen, it's necessary. His thoughts were then interrupted when he saw that the boy's face had a big smile, because he thought he could absorb even more power from that demon, and now he needs to become stronger than him. The madness of our protagonist is so great that the Demon King is the one who gets scared. Finally, outside the rift, he recognizes that getting out is much easier than getting in. As he needs a guide in the mountains, he thought of going to the tribe of the creatures. He doesn't know what happened, but he wishes to see those creatures, perhaps because he absorbed the Mountain King. But his eyes came across something terrifying. Their village had been completely destroyed. All that was left was destruction and abandoned bodies. Mephisto noticed that their deaths were slow and must have served to entertain someone. Even without knowing who did this, he recognized that it was someone with a nature more cruel than most demons. The boy felt completely powerless before that. Monsters can die at any moment, and he has also killed some of those creatures. But he never treated them like objects. His rage kept growing, and maybe this is a result of the cruelty seal. Taking a deep breath, he calmed down again, because he is not the king of those creatures, until his eyes noticed something that was there. Small dots had appeared on the horizon line. A boy approached a small mound of snow and started moving it with his hands. He kept searching desperately until he found an object. The words began to come out of his mouth automatically. He had found that small boy who wouldn't stop talking during the journey and began to remember the enthusiasm he carried. Even though the journey was hard, he remained quite optimistic. Faced with the boy's rage, even the demon became uneasy. Seeing all those bodies, he confirmed that it must have been the work of those same people. Our protagonist didn't like feeling like crap for the second time in the same day. The knights from earlier faced a hard battle ahead. The princess runs to save her own life, but ended up stumbling in her steps, making her knights worried. She asked them not to worry about her, since they don't know when the assassins might appear again. She was a daughter of the Blue Lion and decided she would not be a burden to her knights, who still remain very concerned about her safety. The girl feels guilty because many people died because of her, and she cannot give up in that circumstance. It has been a month since they entered the forest, searching for the grave, and it seems their efforts are leading nowhere. She looks to the sky when she thinks of the memories of her father. The daughter of the great Blue Lion is incapable of wielding a sword. One of the family's rules is that lions only follow the strong, and maybe she will be rejected. While walking through the castle corridors, she had to hear comments like that. Even so, she never stopped pushing herself in sword practice, training for several hours in the training field. While she couldn't stop blaming herself since she had no talent at all. Thus, the weight of being the daughter of the Blue Lion became an increasingly heavy burden. Her name is Isabelle, and she seemed to be understood by her father. The Blue Lion appears to be a compassionate man, and he apologized for placing such a heavy burden on his daughter, but to her, the only one to blame is herself for lacking talent. He said that Isabelle doesn't need to follow in his footsteps to become a Blue Lion, because she is much more than that. She is a member of his family. Not to mention that he's still in shape and has muscles as hard as rocks. So she shouldn't worry about the future of the lion, since he would continue to pursue his dream of becoming the best swordsman on the continent. Words that made her very happy. Until one beautiful day, her father didn't wake up anymore. The symptoms he had were similar to mana blockage. His mana circulation was compromised as he used his aura recklessly. Soon his muscles would atrophy. This can be avoided if the mana flow is restored, but since he is very strong, there isn't much that can be done. They depend on some magical instrument capable of doing that. Isabelle is on this journey to save her father. Normal items are completely useless, so she went after a magical tool that only the mage's tower possesses. But her journey was full of obstacles. Not even the magic tower had capable equipment, so Isabelle traveled across the continent in search of clues that could contribute to her father's recovery, until she heard about a tomb that belonged to the king of those frozen mountains. It might be full of treasures, and whoever found them would become rich. Those words captured Isabelle's attention because among the treasure there could be magical instruments. After searching for a while, she confirmed that the tomb exists and even managed to narrow down where it could be. But unfortunately, rumors began to spread, and the rumor that she was pursuing it reached her uncle's ears. In her last expedition, she ended up being attacked by assassins. Her uncle wants the succession to the throne to happen. That's why he attacked his brother's heir. Now all she needs is to find that tomb. While walking, her knight appeared with sword in hand, asking her to hide. The other knight held her firmly by the arms. In a threatening manner, They said they had already been looking for them, since they had completely disappeared after the last attack. And as they belonged to the same family, he said he would make it quick. Those are elite guards of Isabel's family. While she is worried, they keep looking for her. Her loyal knights said that all of them will pay with their lives. She was instructed to keep running, but Isabel doesn't want to abandon her knight, who will end up losing his life. The other said that this sacrifice would be made so that she could survive, and it couldn't be wasted. Harsh words that made Isabel freeze, until she heard a strange voice calling her name. He said that the knight will soon die, and it's better if she answers his call. Before she could say anything, she saw her knight being pierced by a sword, while his assassin keeps smiling, saying that now he will cut off the knight's head. Isabel screams for him to stop, and so he does. Knowing that she is the target of all those actions, she asked for the violence to end. The assassin said that it's not enough, since the order he received was to kill everyone related to Isabel, especially the witnesses, saying that if she hadn't run, it wouldn't have been necessary to take all those lives. While she remembers all that destruction, the assassin tries to throw all the blame on her, making Isabel feel even more devastated. Realizing that several innocent people had lost their lives because of her, the assassin decided he would take her life right now, but had to stop his attack when he heard a stranger's voice. Our protagonist had witnessed everything while he was in a magically altered form. The leader of the assassins started to get nervous. Since high up in the trees, there seemed to be a witness to all of that, and one who didn't seem willing to ignore it. Our protagonist descended from the tree, landing in the snow near the assassins. He prepared to defend against the incoming attacks, but he wouldn't show mercy to those people. The assassin said he had just sealed his own fate, until our protagonist vanished from in front of him, leaving the assassin's eyes wide with shock. Since he hadn't been able to follow that movement, realizing this is a magic user, he immediately began to create distance, and he asked what the identity of that stranger was. This gave Isabel and her knight time to also get to safety, but they wanted to know if someone else was alright. Our protagonist, when descending from the tree, ended up falling awkwardly, yet he said he didn't hurt his body, only his pride. The assassins want to know if every mage falls in such a clumsy way. As to get up, the boy thinks he ruined his dramatic entrance. Isabel remembered that during the first attack, someone had disappeared. She wouldn't let him get involved in these problems and asked him to run away because this was not his concern. The assassin reminded them that no witness would escape, and gave the order to eliminate the man. Several of them launched themselves at our protagonist, and he remembered that he would show no mercy to any of them, since they were all the worst kind of trash. The boy was only waiting for the assassins to get closer, then unleashed a powerful gust of wind against them. In the face of that magical power, there was nothing they could do, and they were completely frozen. As soon as that happened, the boy clenched his fist tightly, causing pieces of their bodies to fall to the ground, completely destroyed. Isabel and her remaining knight realized that this stranger is very powerful. The leader of the assassins began to worry, as he was no longer the most dangerous presence in the forest. He gave orders to his men not to waste time to finish off the stranger quickly. While dodging the blows, the boy asked who had given them permission to do that. His reflexes had greatly improved. Opening one of his hands, he commanded his magic to pierce. Several blades emerged, and they were aimed at his attackers, who were pierced and sliced as if they were blocks of butter. While pieces of assassins flew, those still alive ran for their lives, but they were brutally defeated by our protagonist, leaving only their leader alive. After that scene, he had already soiled his underwear with fear and asked if he knew which family they belonged to. Our protagonist didn't care about that and suggested that the stranger bow first. The leader of the assassins started puffing himself up, while Isabel wanted to know who the stranger was who subdued all those men so easily. He's definitely a very strong mage, and it would be dangerous to get close to him. The leader of the assassins ignored that and attacked anyway. Thinking he would be able to take this life, our protagonist noticed that his opponent was very fast. Isabel shouted for him to keep his distance. Following her advice, he used magic to strengthen his weapons, and now that he was far enough, he could attack with a clear aim. He sent a large row of ice blocks toward his opponent. The assassin said that wasn't enough to stop him, destroying all those blocks with the blade of his sword, and now he was finally going to end that fight. But to the assassin's surprise, his sword was stopped by another ice block, which this time he couldn't cut at all. Our protagonist noticed the assassin's growing fear and said that there's something more important there than unbreakable ice, which is the inevitable fact that they would be buried in that place. Once again, the assassin began to sweat in complete panic, being struck by a great power that came from our protagonist. Finally, there was no more danger in that place, because our protagonist had taken them all down. The knight, who was still conscious, was impressed by that display of power. They didn't imagine there was someone so strong there. Isabel realized that despite the power, he is the same age as her, which makes it all the more impressive, since he could become much stronger as he matures. After all that combat, the boy began to sigh deeply. Memories of his travel companions and the creatures began to emerge, and he sincerely wished they could rest in peace. Mephisto said those people wouldn't stop staring at him, and he was starting to get annoyed. Our protagonist knows that, but he doesn't know how to act around these people. Even though they were saved, they were also apprehensive. Finally, he said it had been a while since they last saw each other. Even though they had been rescued, they didn't know who this man was and decided to be cautious. But that's not how Isabel was thinking. She knelt before him and thanked her unexpected savior. Our protagonist said it wasn't necessary to go that far, but Isabel ordered her guards to do the same. So the two of them bowed before the young man. He said he did what any sensible person would have done in his place, and Mephisto quite liked that show of manners. Approaching him, Isabel apologized but said she would like to ask a favor, and the boy replied that he was in the middle of an engagement, so she said she would be willing to pay for that help. Now the boy doesn't know how to avoid that situation. Inside a carriage, they resume their journey. The knight and Isabel are apprehensive, waiting for a response from the boy. Mephisto said that even though he's trying to hide it, his smile is still visible. But there was no way to hide that happiness, as he had received something so valuable. That was no ordinary gold coin. It was engraved with the symbol of the blue lion. He knows what family that is, and Isabel apologized again for not introducing herself. To the protagonist, now her nobility makes perfect sense. Among royalty, she is very beautiful, and even the prince who marries her. But she was abandoned for being a scentless flower, as she was born with no talent at all, and being the daughter of the blue lion that ended up defining her life. The boy heard that she had been living alone since her engagement was broken, and he noticed great sadness in her eyes. Without revealing his real name, he said his name is Rick, and that he's happy to have met the daughter of the Blue Lion, leaving Isabel embarrassed. But he emphasized that her trust is admirable, and she possesses a rare tenacity. Isabel accepted the compliments even though she was intimidated. Then the boy remembered about his fee, and Isabel said she doesn't have much at the moment, but she would like him to escort them to the capital of the empire, and the guard reminded them that they hadn't found the tomb yet. Isabel doesn't want to lose more of her men because of her own greed and decided she will negotiate with her uncle. And the boy realized those assassins were involved with matters within her own family. Then he remembered that the Blue Lion himself had a condition very similar to his, and saw in this a great opportunity, the chance to make the Blue Lion owe him a favor. The union between their two families could create quite a spectacle. The protagonist smiles while starting to think about his future plans, leaving Isabel very intrigued. Knowing that he is skilled, Isabel would like to pay him double. But for now, she can only pay part of what was promised. She is ashamed for not having more money, but that problem is far too small for the protagonist, stating that he would escort her safely to her destination. Thus, they headed for the capital of the empire. Mephisto wants to know why the boy wants money, since there's plenty of gold in the dragon's nest, and the boy said he has a plan, and said he shouldn't talk about money if he's never been cold and hungry. Mephisto seemed to reflect on those words. The truth is, the boy is also out of money, and he needs to take care of his body, since he has one. He's also impressed with sound transmission, a very interesting skill that only needs a bit of mana to speak to a target. Mephisto only taught it because he was annoyed by staying silent when others are around. Seeing that he enjoys talking, the boy understood why the demon hates being silenced. While they talk silently, Isabel remains very alert. To her, the boy is too quiet, and she started to think it might be because of the small payment she gave. Putting that aside, she desperately needs his help, in case stronger assassins come their way, fearing that they might not be enough. Inside the royal palace, a man presents himself, and her uncle has learned that all the assassins were exterminated. The one who delivered the message apologized for it, but the man sitting on the throne didn't like that news at all, and decided to punish the messenger by cutting off his head with a single blow. Talking with his men, he started thinking about how Isabel might move. They already know she is abandoning the frozen mountain, and that she must be heading toward the capital of the empire. This can only mean she wishes to negotiate, was the conclusion Hilton reached. He is the leader of the first squad. The old man thought Isabel was foolish for wanting to negotiate with him, and said Hilton would only have one chance to do the right thing. Day broke and the horses came to a stop. The guard outside announced that they had finally arrived in Licente. It looks like a large city. Isabel is thankful they managed to arrive in just 2 days of non-stop travel. Mephisto said his whole body is aching. Our protagonist finds it amusing, since his body isn't even real, but still recommended that he keep better posture. Several guards are at the entrance of the city. Our protagonist immediately recognized those uniforms. The second squad of the Blue Wolves had been assembled. The soldier thinks the reason is too trivial to mobilize the whole squad, since Isabel's arrival in that city is a declaration of defeat. His superior ignored those words while cutting off the soldier's head. He knows she will have to pass through Layson if she wants to reach the capital of the empire. Our protagonist realized that the situation would be much worse, since those soldiers are determined to turn this village into all of their graves. Isabel knew she couldn't walk freely, but she wasn't expecting something like this. Her guard asked if they should turn back, but she said no. They had already caught the attention of some guards. Turning back would make them even more suspicious. They should abandon the carriage, enter the city stealthily, and find another means of transportation. But our protagonist said it wouldn't be necessary, and used one of his spells. That way, the carriage passed through the guards, as if none of them were suspicious of anything. Isabel remained very apprehensive inside, since they still needed to pass through the gates. They were close to finally being inside the city, and finally her dread was over because they entered in complete safety. Once inside the city, they got off the carriage. Isabel wanted to know what kind of magic he used, and our protagonist said he used illusion to change their appearance, but it breaks easily, so they should be cautious. The guards were also very grateful for what our protagonist had done. They would spend the night there while the protagonist handled some matters. Mephisto didn't like that strategy. He preferred that our protagonist had finished them all, but the boy prefers a more cautious approach. Mephisto said the seal and soul language are meant for situations like this, and reminded the boy that he should soon return to the academy. In fact, he should, but he wants to resolve something first. It's been some time since that happened. He needs to know the situation with Fatso, since he plans to take revenge on him with great dedication. Even the Demon King pities those targeted by our protagonist. While walking through the city, they saw some children playing. And you remembered he felt mana coming from those knights and wanted to know what that was. The protagonist said it was aura, which didn't exist in the demon's time. OA martial artists use mana with their own bodies. Mages have a mana circle in the heart, and warriors circulate mana through the abdomen. And they also have their own power rankings, the highest being superior. There are 5 chains in total, and only one person managed to form more than 5. The Demon King wants to know who that human is. Our protagonist said it's the Golden Lion, the strongest person on the whole continent. Mephisto thinks that by the name, the person must be very arrogant, but the protagonist revealed that's not the case, because he was even humble to his own grandfather. Now the demon has a better notion of his strength, and eagerly hopes to meet him one day. To find out what happened in his absence, our protagonist bought newspapers from the last 30 days. Inside the academy, Fatso still doesn't know what to do about our protagonist because he thinks he is isolated. A student said he is the frontrunner in the elections, yet Fatso wants a crushing victory. And that student with glasses is waiting for Fatso's orders. The order is for the narrators to be pressured even more. The family spokesperson reports all of this to Scene, and that everyone wants to know what will happen with the excavation rights. Still hunched over the table, the boy begins to smile. In truth, he was crying because he couldn't stand his sister anymore and his friends still hadn't returned. But he had already solved part of the problems. He decided he would keep resisting. Until Elric returned, while our protagonist reads the paper, he realized that his friend is going through serious problems. Even so, Fatso seems to be taking great advantage of the situation. But the moment of his well-deserved defeat will soon come. The problem is that our protagonist is worried about Scene and began to think about how he could help him. While thinking, a large explosion occurred in the city that made him immensely worried. Fire was spreading inside that building. Our protagonist went there to see what was happening, and upon exiting the building, he encountered a tragic scene. It was as if the whole city was on fire. Isabel's guard wants to know if she trusts the boy because he is still suspicious of him, and the girl remembered that they were all saved by the stranger. The knight wants to be cautious. Isabel noticed he has been overly protective since what happened in the mountain, and said she completely understands his point of view and should keep one thing in mind. Doubting that boy is doubting the decision she made. The knights remained silent as there was nothing more they could say. Since Isabel believes our protagonist is full of virtue, my God, she wants him and doesn't know how to say it. To the knights, he is just a mercenary who wants money. But Isabel is sure he did that on purpose, since he helped from the beginning without asking for anything, and would have helped even without payment. Everything changed once he found out she belonged to the Lion family. He took into account that her family's reputation could be tarnished and made himself available. Now the knights better understand the help received from the protagonist, because that's how Isabel has seen it from the beginning. Right after that, a large explosion occurred. The fire was spreading across the city. That was being done by some men sent by Isabel's uncle. The one who looks like a hyena wanted to set even more of the city on fire. That idea displeased his companion, but it might be the perfect bait to make Isabel appear, since it puts innocent people in danger. The hyena asked that they should keep burning, and his companion said they should remain cautious. The madman believes he can handle the danger, since he's stronger than many guards, and he would love to find a worthy opponent. With that, he and his companion took off. While chaos spreads through the city, they began looking for the princess. The order is to eliminate everyone except for Isabel. Recovering from the explosion, she wants to know if her knights are alright, but she doesn't understand why that happened. Screams of panic and terror can be heard. Isabel observes all the destruction in that city, while injured and desperate people keep running, until one of the guards told her to be careful, since the explosions were still happening, throwing the princess's body far away. The guard wants her to leave that dangerous place, but she had endured enough. She was tired of feeling completely powerless, and wants to face her enemies to save those people. Until today, she was told she had neither talent nor power. But she doesn't want to keep running forever, living a life of shame. Remembering the words of our protagonist to her, that she possessed tenacity, no matter what happens, even if she dies. This time, Isabel will not run, deciding that she would finally fight. The city continues to be destroyed. For a brief moment, she closed her eyes until she opened them again full of fear, not understanding what had just happened. Our protagonist had appeared before her, freezing all that fire. His magic began to spread, reaching the sources of the flames, extinguishing any threat to that city to the joy of its residents. Isabel was amazed by all that power, because all that destruction had been stopped by a single man, a mercenary she had hired. She doesn't know if it will ever happen, but she hopes she can walk beside him one day. Our protagonist is also very angry with all that destruction, because those knights were ending innocent lives. Mephisto really liked that because once a Mervinger's rage is lit, it's hard to extinguish. And one trait of that family, which he has faced before, is that they become even more dangerous when angry. The demon said that his enemies are even more numerous and stronger too. The boy knows it will be hard and that he needs to be careful with the innocents. Mephisto asked why he hasn't fled yet, and the boy said there's a saying in his family: those who have power must prove they are worthy of possessing it. And that's why his family has always been the tip of the spear in every war. Our protagonist is on top of a tower, drawing the attention of all those knights. The guy who looks like a hyena knows his scrolls were powerful, so the one who put out his fire must be even more so. If that person is from the magic tower, they're in trouble, but he doesn't seem to belong to it. Now all they need to do is eliminate the princess and escape. Isabel is holding a sword, and some assassins are coming toward her. She realizes she has no strength in her legs and won't be able to dodge, but our protagonist would never allow her to be harmed. His look is one that says he's going to solve everything through the power of protagonism. Isabel decided to adopt that confidence too, so they managed to escape the assassin's reach. Our protagonist knows there are 40 knights in that city, and he needs to lure them to a place where there aren't so many people. One of the assassins blew a whistle, and our protagonist was already completely surrounded, but using his magic, he disappeared right in front of them. During his escape, he ended up encountering more assassins, so he needed to defend himself immediately. In one of the city squares, he was completely surrounded. The assassins believed that this way they could finally take him down. The one who looks like a hyena was excited since it was his first hunt for a mage. He wants to know where the princess is hiding, but our protagonist won't give that information. And he said they wouldn't find out anyway, because they seemed too stupid, which made the hyena even more furious. Ordering the assassins to bring him the boy's head, our protagonist had already used a lot of mana to extinguish the fire. The dragon's heart had grown stronger, but his body wouldn't be able to withstand all that power. During his training, he could simply restart, but now it was real. Without the numerical advantage, he realized it would be just as Isabel had told him, so he decided he would go for the leader first, using his axe. Our protagonist charged forward furiously, but had to abort his attack midway to save his own life. He also felt his body wasn't moving the same way, and Mephisto began to doubt whether he had really defeated the Mountain King, calling him a great fool. After that, a major impact occurred. A threatening glare was fixed on our protagonist. Mephisto warned that this simulation was nothing like reality, and the boy dismissed the comment if he wasn't going to help. Irritated by it all, our protagonist stood up furiously and struck one of the assassins. The hyena provocatively told him to use magic instead of fighting the guards. Even more enraged, our protagonist began using dragon magic, landing blows with great piercing power against his enemies. The hyena wants to know if that's all the power he has. Unfortunately, the boy still hadn't been able to defeat him, and that sadistic assassin wanted to keep enjoying the fight, forcing our protagonist to dodge all his blows, until he finally seemed to find an opening in his defense, being promptly countered by our protagonist. The impact of their attacks echoed throughout the square. The assassin approached, dragging his sword along the ground, saying that's what he gets for being reckless. Since the boy had been completely surrounded, there was no escape route, and now they were going to end it all using a powerful attack. Behind the protagonist in the sky, fireworks began to explode. The assassin grew worried with all that signaling, and our protagonist was pleased the distraction had worked, revealing an even greater amount of his power, causing a large magic circle to appear as well. The assassins were already starting to grow worried about it, but their eyes were already filled with the deepest fear. Our protagonist was covered in power, and a great dragon appeared behind his back. The assassins knew that if they didn't stop him now, they never would. And the boy waited patiently, with a smile on his face. Making the magic circle glow even brighter, he said he wouldn't die in that place. He and the princess exchanged a quick glance. The two fled from that place, and one of the assassins said they were escaping, calling in squad number 3 to start the pursuit. Our protagonist asked Isabel how they fight and learned that they attack in a coordinated way even when facing a single enemy. And as the name suggests, they attack like a pack of wolves. Knowing this, our protagonist thought he needed to lure them into a plaza to deal with them all at once. Isabel said it would be amazing if there were a trap, and the idea began to settle in our protagonist's mind. Isabel wanted to know if he had thought of something. Our protagonist had a favor to ask her, and that's how the great explosion of fireworks happened. Right after Isabel managed to evacuate all the civilians from that square, she was supposed to use that signal to communicate with our protagonist, because after that, you would completely devastate that place. Using dragon magic, he managed to cover the entire area with ice, acknowledging that magic circles save a lot of mana. The leader of the assassins is immobilized, and our protagonist said they were all fools for not noticing the trap being built. And then he brought his frozen hand close to the hyena's face, saying that without a doubt, he wouldn't have a peaceful death. But at the last moment, one of the hyena's subordinates tried to attack our protagonist. He said that the boy's luck had run out, and the boy, looking at his new attacker, realized he still had enemies to deal with, for he was once again surrounded by all those assassins. They now knew they had been lured to that square, and that it would have been impossible without careful planning and trust. But even more frightening was realizing that the boy kept smiling as if he knew he was being watched. That made the assassin uncomfortable, as he was no longer sure if he had fallen into a trap. His head was full of doubts. So he decided to negotiate, saying he would spare his life if he handed over Isabel, but there was a big problem with that for our protagonist. He has no intention of letting any of them live, which left the assassin quite frightened. As our protagonist releases his icy aura, underwear begins to be destroyed automatically. They should not have done that in the city, and there is no mercy for knights who abandon their code of conduct. One of the assassins has the brilliant idea to attack the protagonist, instructing his comrades to coat their bodies with aura. Our boy uses dragon magic to blind that blade, buying time so he could dodge, but realizing that his magic was not effective. The assassin comes back to attack, and this time the boy uses magic to push him away. Once again surprised by the edge of the sword, since his magic had grown weaker. He doesn't know if it's a side effect of the seal of cruelty. All his other elemental magics have weakened. Using that seal has proven much harder than he imagined. Unlike the mountain, which was full of ice magic, in that place it doesn't reach its full potential, and it consumes a lot of energy. But he has other strategies. This time he managed to force one of the assassins on the defensive, landing a hit with his sword. There exists a way to crush the scoundrels, releasing his icy aura once again against them, preventing the assassins from advancing. Even so, one of them tries to keep attacking, but his blade was being blocked by the ice, which our protagonist continued to release toward them. Striking with an aura slash, the assassin plans to finish off the boy. The attack approaches with speed. His hands have been wounded due to the protagonist's pressure. Small cuts are appearing all over his body, and the boy's eyes glow intensely. Determined if ended all, the assassin pushed forward even more. He told his men to finish the job, but when he looked back, he realized they had all turned into human popsicles. That freezing happens at the slightest touch. Blocking the attack instead of evading it was his biggest mistake. As his body is being frozen, the assassin says he's never heard of an ice curse like that. All our protagonist did was end a curse within the ice magic. It's impressive that the leader of the assassins made such a foolish mistake. Acknowledging the boy's strength, he said that soon he would regret everything he had done, since soon the squad leader would make his life easy. Out of patience, our protagonist cut off his head and now knows who he must seek, for he will not leave those men alone on his path to hell, since he will soon send the leader of that squad down the same path. Throughout the city, the massive ice formation caused by the battle can be seen. Some assassins fled to tell what had happened, still regretful for having fled that fight. The young man advised his companions to set their own bodies on fire and run. Because it no longer matters whether the princess dies or not, they should give their own lives to burn down the entire city. Those assassins are proud, and they couldn't run from everything that had happened, and they are preparing to set the whole city ablaze. It is no longer enough for just the princess to die. Mephisto soon felt they would try something completely insane, and before he could ask what he thought, the boy realized it too. They were already being attacked again. Mephisto said there is only one race more insane than demons: humans. No matter what they try to do, their true face is destruction. The boy went hunting for the last remaining assassins, as the biggest problem is the magic scroll they carry. And that is a 6-circle magic spell. One small mistake, and the whole city would become a sea of flames. While passing through the city, the boy encountered one of the assassins, but it might already be too late. Seeing the scroll in his hands, he tried to use magic to stop him. A sword slash was much faster than him. The assassin didn't even understand what had happened, but now he's missing an arm. And our protagonist was not finished yet. Even with the chance to flee, the boy acknowledged that this girl is truly brave, yet realized that back on the frozen mountain, Isabel had returned to help as well, and the scroll of futility was perfect. She noticed that her enemy was still alive, and he had decided to attack her, even without one of his arms. But his effort was useless, since the boy completely froze him. Our protagonist was already tired of all that and decided he would end his life once and for all. But the assassin said it wasn't over because he had forgotten about the other two. The city was still in danger. While they were wasting time with that assassin, the preparations must have already been completed, and the Blue Wolves must have already achieved their goal. It won't be long before that city is filled with screams. Our protagonist revealed that he had already taken care of all three. That sentence left the assassin desperate, as his plans had been thwarted. When the boy passed close to that assassin, he gave a small smile, because he had used his piercing magic, hitting the other two who were trying to flee through the city. Now there was nothing more they could do against those people. Having difficulty accepting that she had been defeated, the assassin said this must be a joke. He tried to plead for mercy, saying he would help Isabel, revealing that his original orders were only to scare her a little, and as a captain, he would be listened to. Isabel told him to talk to her sword, because it is more understanding. The dialogue was brief and ended with his head rolling across the floor. She apologized to our protagonist for having lost her patience, but he was already thinking of letting her do it. The priority was to know if she was okay. Isabel said yes, but the boy understood that her body must be in shock. One of her requests was that at least one of the Blue Wolves be left alive. The soldiers of her family always kept their distance from people without talent like her. Even when they bowed to her, they only did it because of her father. As for the servants of her uncle, the Blue Wolves, they didn't always show respect, and they always stared back at her, showing all their disdain. That last one would be left alive so he could carry a message. The flat land flipped, and the wolves who intimidated her now fear the girl. Isabel said the position of Blue Lion will never belong to her uncle. Our protagonist watched as she delivered that message. The truth is that those men feared this mysterious mage. Isabel wished she had that power too, and that she was as talented as our protagonist. but she acknowledges that she can't keep lamenting forever and needs to seek her own strength. And the start of that will be changing her weak behavior. Our protagonist asked where she was going. She said she was going to meet her father to plan the future, but the boy wanted to know what she would do about her personal guard. Isabel said she would try to ask for help from some of her father's old friends, a wise decision. As she agreed with that, Isabel began thinking about the future. If her father doesn't get better, she will have very difficult days ahead. It would be great to have help from that mage, but it's not her family's custom. She doesn't want to part ways with him, but she also wouldn't like to be even more in his debt until he handed her a few sheets of paper. Taking them in her hands, she realized it was a thesis. Our protagonist said that her father's illness is similar to another one he had been studying, and he hopes to help with that, since that was the cure for the condition known as mana blockage. Isabel really liked that gift and gathered with her guards. They began talking about it. As they were injured, our protagonist began healing them, and a boy apologized for having hidden his identity until now, undoing the enchantment that concealed his identity, revealing that he is the lord of the Mervinger family. To Isabel's complete surprise, she realized that he is the Duke of the Radiant Star. That is a title specific to his family, earned after the war against the demons, a title that symbolizes their brilliance on the battlefield. The name itself holds no power, but it carries great value. Isabel asked if he shouldn't be in a coma in the hospital, since that's what she'd been hearing. The boy said that at the moment there are circumstances he cannot talk about, but it's true that he suffered from mana blockage until recently. What she now holds is a treatment he created by researching his own body, and it should be useful for her father. As she intends to fight back against those who tried to take her life, it would be good if the Blue Lion were present. With tears streaming down her face, Isabel doesn't know how to repay such kindness. Placing his hand on her head, he told her not to worry because soon he would receive the fair portion of what he had done. The two looked at each other intently. Isabel said she would like to be the one to help him this time, and asked if he would like her to make him a great hero. In the middle of the destroyed city, people begin to rebuild their lives. Mephisto asked if it's really okay for the boy to reveal his identity. But the boy doesn't care about that, and he knows Isabel's family will come after him. And since his magic is very specific, he will soon become well known at the academy. Mephisto realized he's setting the stage since his identity will be exposed either way. Since he helped the Blue Lion family, he hopes to receive that same help when rebuilding his own family. Mephisto is impressed by the boy's journey, who besides his talent for magic is also a great strategist. A woman asked him to stay there a little longer, but our protagonist said that life must go on for all of them. She is very grateful because thanks to his interference, her son is still alive. Another person came to thank him for his hard work and didn't know how to express their gratitude. Our protagonist said he was just doing his job, and the knight said he would never forget that favor. Our protagonist gets embarrassed, and Mephisto really wanted to say that he only did it for the money. Now he wants to know what the knights will do, and he said those are internal problems. The knight said he would find out who was responsible and would return to the capital with the princess. Mephisto realized that Isabel's uncle's notoriety will grow with the public promotion, realizing that the girl can also be cunning. While receiving the affection of those people, the boy realized this is his responsibility as a noble. Mephisto is annoyed and said it's not about responsibility. All he found was a justification. So the boy returned to his path, because he needs to see how Fatty has been spending his days. It seems he already knows what happened, and he's desperate to secure the excavation rights, no matter what happens. Even so, the Narrasters remain in the way. Fatty wants that student to find a way to make it all happen, even if he has to bribe the right people. He told him to do it immediately, while the boy hurried out of his office. The news keeps growing about the situation, and there are 3 days left until the election, and Fatty needs to secure the escalation rights. A dark demonic energy begins to form around him, asking the man to repeat the words he had said. That mysterious figure wants to know if Fatty is ready to cooperate with them. Fatty wants to know how this man is going to help him with the election and how you will get the right of exclamation. He said the preparations have been made, he just needs Fatty's consent. But he is still in disbelief, trying to understand how this man achieved what he couldn't. Since he lacks faith, the man is no longer that interested in making a deal with Fatty, because he's not the only candidate present in that election. A bit more pressured, Fatty wants to know how he can cooperate. And the mysterious man said he should give his cooperation a siesta. That's too simple compared to what he's wishing for. And Fatty wants to know if that's really all there is to it. With a malicious smile on his face, the mysterious man said it's more than enough. Little by little, his image began to disappear from that couch. Across the city, several rumors are being spread. They're talking about the huge problem caused by the Blue Lion family. Because of an internal conflict, they nearly destroyed a city. Many people ended up losing their lives in the process, until a powerful mage appeared and took them all down. People are saying he's a very handsome guy, the hero of Lacente. Our protagonist is hearing these rumors. Mephisto said that ever since they entered that place, all they hear is talk about our protagonist. The boy just wanted to have a good meal since it's been a long time since he's been to the capital. Then he remembered Isabel said there's nothing better than a hero's tale to improve public opinion, and she promised to do that for him for when he reveals himself in the future, ensuring that he has a solid foundation for it, while they continue to put pressure on her traitorous uncle. The problem is that people are only talking about this hero, and they're already speculating about his love life. His narrative has now become a grand romance, but even so, it's great for spreading his name across the continent. It would be great if he had a talent like Isabel's when reviving his family. Then he told the Demon King that they were going somewhere else. But it seems our protagonist was found by someone. He was nearly hit by that strike, and the people in that restaurant immediately became agitated, imagining that a fight had suddenly broken out. They'd assume it must be a hero doing something in the capital. But those two people are no longer fighting. Our protagonist is paying close attention to this person, and his attacker didn't like that he dodged it. The boy said it had been a long time and that his friend was taking this joke way too seriously. But Scene is filled with hatred because he endured so much for his friend and he should have at least let himself get hit. After everything he had done, Scene was already fed up with having to endure all that political pressure. The fight ends before it begins and the two start talking again. He already figured you would have to do something difficult for the protagonist, but warned that he owes him a dragon's nest. As they order a beer, he asked about his relationship with the daughter of the Blue Lion and learned that they're just friends. Scene ordered a full meal to have at that place. Our protagonist smiles because he knows his friend noticed the difference in his mana, yet isn't asking questions about it. The truth is that he's still very annoying with all the stress he had to deal with. Even the Demon King agrees with him. The two celebrate and Scene makes a point of saying that his friend owes him a punch to the face. Either way, everything is going according to plan, but it's possible our protagonist won't succeed. And he said that only two things matter now, reviving his family and dealing with those who tried to kill him. And those two things will happen simultaneously. Scene mourned that the political situation has been a living hell, and he was startled to remember that the witch from his family must have heard the rumors too. If his sister heard the rumor, she must already be completely insane, and that could cause their plan to go down the drain. It seems that the excavation rights had been granted to the academy. She is furious because she doesn't know how her brother allowed that to happen, and she was heading straight to the hospital, and she noticed that the tone of the news in the newspaper had changed. Fatty is in a favorable position right on the eve of the election, while the Narrister family relinquished their claim over the Dragon's Union. That's far too suspicious. She wants to know what her brother has been up to, and she learned that he hasn't done anything special so far. At first he did all that because it was for a friend, but after losing the rights he remained silent. Now she knows exactly where to go. She understood that the excavation rights don't belong to the academy or to her family. This whole time they were trying to deceive her, and now she's going to get to the bottom of it. The position of rector at the academy, besides being symbolic, carries a lot of power, because it brings considerable influence within the political sphere. Our protagonist holds the title unique to his family, the Radiant Star. And finally, the day of the rector election at the academy has arrived. Fatty said that such a discovery will never be repeated in history, and that it happened during his administration. And he promised to continue investing in research. Scene is very uncomfortable hearing those words, and is already wondering if his friend will be able to do all that alone. Since Fatty's approval rating had increased significantly, it's possible he bribed several people. But our protagonist said he has a big surprise. The mysterious man praised Fatty's speech. He is very confident even though he hasn't been re-elected and promised to follow through on their agreement. They could discuss it again soon at another time. But Fatty has no intention of helping that man after he's elected, because soon he'll regain all of his political prestige and won't ally himself with a small organization. And crushing them will be easy once he's re-elected. It seems the mysterious man is already anticipating that betrayal. All the candidates have presented themselves and the voting was about to begin, until someone appeared there, leaving Scene very worried. It was his sister who showed up in the middle of the election. The elderly man asked if she knew what she was doing, because those seats are reserved only for the lords of the hexagram families. She came there to represent her family and said she's more invested in this than all of them, because she knows exactly what is going to happen. Scene started to get very concerned. On the microphone, someone asked for everyone's attention. An announcement would be made before the election formally began, then asked everyone to take a seat and remain silent. Everyone should have received that magic crystal, and they could check the candidate's information with that instrument. They were to vote for only one of them, and the result would soon be announced. Fatty had been waiting for this day. The guy got so stressed he even lost a bit of weight. Besides that, he had already made agreements with several of the candidates, so he believes everything will go according to his plan. The result would be announced. The protagonist's family would be excluded for not being present. Fatty is anxious to be re-elected. But before the announcement, something happened. Our protagonist appeared at the last moment, leaving many people extremely surprised by his appearance, since interrupting the election was very disrespectful. Scene's pretty sister was already expecting this. While he is cheering for our protagonist, the one before them is the Lord of the Mervinger family, and as the Duke of the Radiant Star, he came to participate, exercising his small right to vote in that place. Some say he is the disgrace of his own family, while others don't know what to say since he was supposed to be in a coma. Even so, our protagonist makes his triumphant entrance. He walks confidently into that hall, while Fatty has no idea how the boy is there. Several people start asking what he's doing there and why he's delaying the election. He said those people are not paying attention to the laws of the Empire, and that he's not there as a student of the academy, but as a duke, as someone who has the right to vote and came to assume his family's place. Fatty said he was happy he had recovered, but warned that the election had already been closed. But our protagonist invoked the power of knowing the legislation of his fictional world. In matters of suspicion about the nature of a candidate before the end of the election, a new vote could take place provided the majority of the present members agreed to it. Fatty's eyes began to burn with hatred as he realized he was in trouble. And the Duke of the Radiant Star has something to say, since he has facts to expose about Fatty, because he is not fit to be a candidate as he had forged confidential documents, and also tried to assassinate the Duke of the Radiant Star. Oh, Fatty, it's time to roast your bacon. In the face of those serious accusations, they asked if the boy had at least some kind of proof. Fatty said they have to follow the election protocol, stressing that our protagonist is there to represent his family, and wants to know if people really want to hear what the boy has to say, claiming that all these accusations have no proof whatsoever. Even if he has some kind of ace up his sleeve, Fatty believes the election won't be changed, and he will show him how real politics works. Fatty believes that none of those people want to hear our protagonist, and the boy said he is being too hasty in deciding things, while Fatty said he is tarnishing that sacred election. Going straight to the point, he showed a recording in which Fatty truly believes there is a dragon's nest in that place. That was the conversation they had, in which the boy was supposed to hand over his family treasure if he was wrong. That entire conversation had been recorded. He said Fatty has no merit in that discovery and even tried to assassinate the one truly responsible for it. Finally, Fatty realized he was in deep trouble, while our protagonist asks if his words truly seem devoid of truth. Very frightened, Fatty said he was being framed for something he didn't do, and the boy said he wouldn't have the skill to deceive a 7th Circle mage, unless he were from the 8th. Little by little, his accusation gains strength as they imagine our protagonist is still unable to use magic. It seems Fatty really did try to kill the Duke of the Radiant Star. Fatty knows that Crystal Sphere was given to an assassin he sent to the nest. Now he realized the student who works with his lackey lost that item. Going to the microphone, he asked the people in that place to remain silent so the matter could be discussed. Scene said that the student with glasses was found near the hospital. Surely he went there on Fatty's orders. But our protagonist believes he must have something to say, and that he has something to hand over. Not long ago, he had been intimidated by Fatty. The boy with glasses was already fed up with being a lackey. He couldn't take the stress anymore, and handed that evidence to our protagonist even though he already had enough proof to screw Fatty over. It remains to be seen why the boy with glasses changed sides. The excavation rights go to the one who discovered it, and Fatty is claiming something that doesn't belong to him. Besides the accusation of attempted murder, he tried to usurp someone else's right. Our protagonist wants to remove him from the election and make him pay for everything he's done so far. The other candidates realize that the excavation rights will not belong to the academy. An old man noticed that mana is flowing through the boy's body and asked if he didn't have a rare condition. Others are curious about his situation as he was supposedly in a coma. They asked the head of the Nerister family if she knew anything, but the girl said it's her brother who knows the protagonist best. Fatty tries at all costs to say that the magic crystal had been corrupted, but he's fully aware that his re-election is in danger, and he will deny everything at all costs and turn to the mysterious man. What he didn't expect is that this same man was on Scene's side. Fatty realized that his situation had gotten much worse. That bastard finally revealed his identity. He is one of the loyal servants of the Nerister family. Scene said his servant was under a lot of stress because of the situation, all thanks to our protagonist. And Fatty realized he had fallen perfectly into the protagonist's plans, being made a fool. Our boy said that problem seems to be solved. So now they can decide how the new vote will happen to choose a new rector. Another person ended up being elected to the position. Mephisto is impressed by the madness and audacity of our protagonist, who took full advantage of the situation. The demon wants to know if they'll let Fatty escape, but the boy isn't worried about that old bald guy, and ended up making sure he heard that through sound conduction, praising the 7th Circle mage's hearing ability and still wondering why he remains silent. So he assumed he's not hearing it because he's talented. The boy can speak directly into his mind since it's unprotected because it lacks hair coverage. After that insult, Fatty went mad, making the boy his target, and said he's an insolent brat. By manifesting his power, people began to panic. Fatty had lost everything and decided he would finish the boy off. But our protagonist wasn't provoking him for no reason. As a massive explosion occurs, that's what he had been waiting for. The boy waits to receive the attack with a smile on his face, manifesting the power of the seal on his hand, creating a massive protective barrier. All the nobles there were immediately impressed. That is a 5th level magic, the White Blizzard. Even so, Fatty remains furious. But our protagonist still has a revenge to fulfill. That magic is quickly identified. It's the hero of Lacent. While others are amazed that the boy was able to block an attack from Fatty, our protagonist is showing that he's not the disgrace of his family. She thought it would be easier to deal with Fatty because he's old, but he's still a 7th Circle mage. But that won't change anything, since the rector is forgetting more important things. Another person had entered the battle, and if Fatty becomes a nuisance, he might be attacked by other students who are present. The Witch of the Firebird made her grand entrance, the newest member of the 7th Circle and the one who managed to tame a phoenix. Others also appeared, saying the rector's actions could be considered terrorism. Only then did Fatty realize he no longer had any political support. That only made his shame even greater, until someone asked if he would stop after going this far. It was our protagonist still provoking Fatty, saying he wasn't even able to leave a scratch on his body. Apparently, Fatty is fueled by provocation. He managed to hit the protagonist in the face, showing that his true power is the fury of baldness, destroying part of the place using the protagonist's body as a weapon. Those who said they would intervene remained completely still, as that simple election had turned into a major event in the city. Mephisto, who watched all the boys' planning, no longer knows if he deserves the title of Demon King. Recognizing that our protagonist's true calling is to receive a title like his, with a smile he asked if he understands now. This is what happens to people who get in his way. Fatty was completely immobilized by chains. After that day, gossip spread through that city like never before. Everyone talks about our protagonist, about what he had done, and that he had not been in a coma all this time. Moreover, he is also the mysterious hero who appeared. Fatty was banned from the academy and imprisoned for attempted murder. While everyone wants to know what the boy had done to cure his own condition, Isabel was able to take care of her father after meeting our prota, and the excavation rights came to belong to the Nerister family. The newspaper speaks about the rise of the young hero. Scene is outraged because he didn't want to read that aloud to our protagonist, but the boy said he's a patient and still feels pain from Fatty's attack. Outside the hospital, several reporters want the opportunity to speak with him. While relaxing in his room, the boy realized that the reporters need the truth. Steen wants to know how he learned all that, and the boy revealed that it's Isabel's doing. But remembering that girl brought back several memories as well, and he said his friend didn't need to know the full extent of them. The only thing Steen hopes is that his friend doesn't cause bigger problems, and he's hoping he'll delay his plans since his father wants to meet the protagonist. Guy Nerister is a mage in the Ninth Circle and the head of his family. A genius among geniuses. Even the protagonist's grandfather wanted to take him as a disciple. Our protagonist and Mephisto are startled by the place in question. They already knew Steen was very rich, but if he had any idea close to reality, he would have taken advantage of that much earlier. His friend's family is the most powerful within the Magic Tower. And finally, our protagonist is going to meet someone truly influential, someone who wishes to surpass him soon. Steen mourned that the protagonist's sister was also coming. He was surprised by that news. It also shows how hectic things have been because of our protagonist, receiving a letter from his sister, who said she's aware of everything, asking him not to cause any trouble until she arrives, and he better not try to run either, or he'll die. Knowing his sister, the boy was quite terrified. He's sure he's screwed. Mephisto realized that in the boy's family, there's a demon even worse than him. Steen recalled that the protagonist's sister worked very hard so he could enter the academy, and for that he's very grateful. But if he knew that girl better, he'd think twice before saying something like that. Steen said the protagonist's sister is way better than his, who isn't called a witch for nothing. After being recognized as a genius, she changed a lot and shouldn't even be called human, and the witch immediately appeared, saying he deserved a beating. Steen turned pale with fear, while his sister said if he wanted a beating so badly, he should have just asked. After slapping him, our protagonist thanked her for intervening in the election. Steen still thought it was strange that she did that and asked if she had any interest in his friend, and the witch asked if the beating had been too weak. That sibling argument began to make our protagonist uncomfortable, until his eyes caught something interesting. He should keep following his friend because there are many traps within that mist. Escaping from that residence is not easy even for 6 circle mages. Only then did they realize that the boy had completely disappeared. Not even Eric knows where he is now. Looking around, he realized he's not with his friends. Even Mephisto had completely vanished. And in that strange dimension, he found himself in front of a large portal. That wasn't easy to create and only proves that the Nerister family has great magical aptitude. Immediately, the boy realized that even if he didn't know what place this was, it's truly perfect for research. Until a voice said the boy seems very interesting. At last, he realized he was being watched. The old man asked if he knew what he was looking at or if he had no idea what it was. The boy realized it's not polite to look at someone else's magic without permission, and that the person responsible for that place must be a 7th circle mage. The old man asked if the boy hadn't heard his words, that he was still thinking about what to say because it was his friend's responsibility to guide him through that place, knowing he needs to get out of that labyrinth soon. The old man began to feel ignored, but said he could hear the gears in the boy's head turning. Without giving any response, our protagonist used a darkness spell, and the old man realized that his labyrinth had been used against himself, increasing even more his interest in that young man. Our boy knows that if he stays in that place, he will end up causing trouble, until something else suddenly happened. The old man was sitting in a meditation position. He would not allow the young man to try to leave, not now that things were getting fun. Steen is worried and wants to know what they should do now, saying they should talk to his father. A man said that the Blue Mist Palace had been opened, and he wants to know what caused it. This man is Steen's father, and he realized that his son had not guided the visit properly, but he learned that he had simply disappeared even before entering that place. Apparently, his great-uncle was responsible for this. He just doesn't know what motivated the old man to do that, Certainly, his condition must have worsened. Seen said they can't just stay there doing nothing, since it was an important guest. He is truly worried, and his sister found that excessive, when she noticed that her brother was far more concerned about the stranger than usually shows for his own relatives. She is increasingly interested in the Duke of the Radiant Star. The same can be said for Guy. Everyone wants to know how skilled our protagonist can be. The Blue Mist Palace is the result of that old man's research, and the young man managed to decipher that location as well as use that magic circle against its creator. That's why he wouldn't let that child leave so quickly, since his expectations for the new Mervinger had grown. Now he will make the most of this opportunity. Our protagonist began reflecting on the old men he had met. They all have one thing in common: they're completely insane, and our boy already needs to start conjuring magical barriers. The mana in that place doesn't have just one attribute, but the main trait of the Narraster is mastering wind. The old man is using wind to shape various other attributes, manipulating heat and humidity to form that mist with the help of light. All of this is caused through wind manipulation. If the old man is so skilled at that, he could cause a tornado easily, even knowing that the interaction wouldn't be dangerous. The boy wants to decipher the rest of that dimension. He had already noticed in his last battle that his elemental spells are weak, and he's going to try using the old man's method in his ice magic. That way he can achieve different results through the soul's voice and the seals he possesses. That way he'll be able to use other attributes in combination with his ice magic. Thinking about this, he remains still and thoughtful, gathering more and more magical energy in his hands. The place began to reverberate with his concentration, and the dragon's heart glowed intensely, as did the seals on his hand. All that focus aimed to strengthen his ice magic. While the seal shines, a voice says it had finally found the boy. His silhouette appeared in another place. He had returned to the company of his friends. They observe him still very surprised, because for a six-circle mage, it takes almost a full day to leave that dimension, and he did it in under an hour. Mephisto also noticed that he managed to raise the seal of cruelty to 5 stars. That magic even impressed the Demon King, but a boy managed to endure it and even stole part of its power. Our protagonist said they should ask if he's okay. Guy doesn't hide that he's surprised and asks questions about the healing of our protagonist's condition. While noticing that he was already at the 6th circle of magic, he had broken the record of the Fire Witch. Apologizing for not having introduced himself before, our protagonist finally does so, meeting his best friend's father. Guy apologized for what he had just gone through, saying it wasn't his intention for him to face that inconvenience with the mist. But the boy said it was a very productive experience. After that, he is finally welcomed into the Narraster residence. The rest of the family was waiting for him. That made him think about his own family. With great sorrow, Isabel noticed that her father had gotten up, and she ran straight into his arms full of joy. He wants to know how she managed to wake him. Since not even the doctors were capable of that, Isabel said that it all happened thanks to Eric. If it weren't for him, everything would have been different. A blue lion was surprised by this news. Soon after, he began getting dressed, while Isabel said he needed to keep resting. But he cannot prioritize his health in this circumstance, and he needs to meet this boy. Since there is someone so righteous in a corrupt world like this one, he has several reasons to continue his journey. Meanwhile, the lackeys of his troubled brother keep getting wrecked. They suffered several losses, and Isabel is still alive. In addition, the blue lion had been healed, and the messenger who brought this news exploded before their eyes. All those problems are being caused by the same mage, who must have placed a curse on that messenger's body. He also learned that the blue lion is already in the middle of a journey to make contact with the protagonist. Knowing that he traveled before seeking revenge left this man very thoughtful, imagining that the blue lion must have gotten even weaker. Determined to stop this meeting, he ordered his men to kill him before reaching the Narraster residence, and he said he didn't kill his subordinate because of the skill he still possesses. Revealing a mark on the back of his hand, in the company of his friend, he continues on toward the main house. Mephisto seems intrigued by that man and asked if he is really human. Our protagonist was puzzled for a moment, but the Demon King said that he was not a demon. But being someone who doesn't belong to the Mervinger, he reached a very high level, high enough to make the Demon King curious. Our protagonist was startled for a moment and said that humans haven't been idle in the last 1,000 years. There are many factions nowadays, and the world is infested with monsters. Mephisto asked if there are more people on the continent as powerful as the Golden Lion. It seems there is a purpose for him to have awakened in this particular era, to live a life of savagery, devouring the strong to become a new king, spreading hostility and chaos wherever he goes, feeling the genuine joy of stepping on those he has defeated. Dreaming then, the whirlwind remembered he needs to help the boy become stronger so he can possess his body. Inside the dining room, the Narraster family is fully gathered. The younger siblings begin to argue because of the visitor, and the mother said they shouldn't argue in front of the hero of Lacenti since her youngest daughter likes him so much. While they continue arguing, our protagonist feels quite happy in that environment, because he began to remember when he was also just a child, when he still had his parents. His meals were very similar to those of that family, joyful and warm. Now all of that is nothing more than memories. The mother asked if he wasn't enjoying the meal, and our protagonist said it was delicious. He had just been distracted by the flavor, assuring that he was really enjoying the whole experience. After they finished the meal, they were having tea in another room. Guy learned that the excavation rights were being granted to them, and our protagonist said he owes a lot to his friend. After that, the head of the family fell silent and asked if he harbors any kind of resentment toward him. His daughter found that question very strange, and Scene also didn't know how to react. The fall of the protagonist's family was truly monumental. 1,000 years of history fell into obscurity, and they were betrayed by people they trusted. Even so, our protagonist said he holds no resentment. Everyone has their own circumstances. The narrator were not involved in the fall of his family. They simply could not help due to political reasons. Mephisto said the boy doesn't need to walk on eggshells around those people, and that 1,000 years ago they were nothing compared to the protagonist's family. But the boy truly has no ill feelings, and Mephisto wants to know his real intention in that place. Even though he's a friend, the position they represent is something he will need to surpass one day. Guy asked if there is something the boy desires, saying that his family will provide all the support the protagonist needs. He said the boy shouldn't feel bad about it since it's a genuine gift for his son's friend. Mephisto noticed that this man is good at negotiations and will seize the opportunity to strengthen connections. Our protagonist knows this proposal is very good, but it could draw attention to this family from his enemies. But they still don't know why he is going to support him, even knowing that his family had fallen. While he was thinking about his requests, a man approached the window, completely shattering the glass as he passed through, leaving everyone inside that room very surprised. Our protagonist began wondering what kind of lunatic would do such a thing. But that old man knows exactly what he did, and the boy recognized him immediately. He had seen this figure somewhere before. It's the same man who was in that dimension with him. Now the old man had found our protagonist and asked him to become his disciple. Our protagonist heard that his friend's father was looking for talented individuals. More than 100 people live in that house as guests. Their true political power lies in those people who end up entering politics. Some of the servants say that the senator had entered the Lord's office and was being disrespectful. But that figure is the head of the Senate, and the one responsible for teaching all the family's mages. The White Knight, Augustine narrator, he does look a bit like Methuselah, doesn't he? The old man is really strong, and he said he was in a hurry and may have made some mistakes. His son said it was fine, but wanted to know why Methuselah had come there, and the old man had already said, because he wants to make that disrespectful child his new disciple. Guy said that he is a Duke of the Empire from the Mervinger family, but while he was introducing the young man, he had already stepped forward. Our protagonist is very grateful to meet that senator. Mephisto was impressed by that agility, and even his friends didn't understand what just happened. Methuselah didn't expect to be recognized by him, but the young man knows that he was one of the great leaders of that family, and had already heard about him through his father. If his family had a pillar like Methuselah, they wouldn't have collapsed so easily. The old man said he wasn't related to the boy's father, but our protagonist said he is very well known. Realizing that he was being overly polite, Methuselah had accepted the compliments anyway, but he wants to know if the boy will become his disciple. As the leader of his family, he couldn't accept that proposal, so he asked Methuselah to withdraw it. But the old man knows he already learned some things in the Blue Mist Labyrinth, and the boy said he learned by accident while trying to escape. Methuselah said his magic was seized without permission, and the boy reminded him that it was the old man who made him suffer first. Faced with that argument, the old man's patience went out the window. Stomping his foot on the ground, he ordered everyone to be silent. That even startled Guy, while the old man said they should learn to obey their elders, showing all of them the extent of his power. Our protagonist is impressed by that light show. That sky is clear and very bright. It doesn't even look like night. While admiring it, he was struck on the back of the neck by the old man. It was as if he had teleported, but that wasn't what happened. It was just physical movement at a speed beyond any mage. Before he could hit the ground, the old man caught the boy, saying that he finally belonged to him, leaving that room in the same way he entered, leaving everyone speechless. The Fire Witch asked why her brother was still standing there after seeing his friend get kidnapped. Apparently, she doesn't know what kind of person our protagonist is. Mephisto, who knows him very well, is speechless. Slowly, he begins to open his eyes, trying to understand where he is, coming face to face with the old man, who asks if he had awakened. Still very frightened, our protagonist asks what had happened. He wants to know where he is, realizing that his hand couldn't find any support. His body began falling toward the ground, immediately being stopped by the old man, who was holding him at the edge of a great cliff. He told him to be careful, as he had almost lost his first disciple in 9 years of life. Our protagonist had been bluffing, as he wanted to know what he could gain from that old man, but didn't expect to be kidnapped. Maybe he made a bet bigger than his resources. Now he needs to concentrate to circulate his mana. Realizing that he is unable to do so, it was as if he had returned to being sick. Methuselah said the boy had already noticed. He is very sensitive, and our protagonist asked what happened. The old man would give details but didn't want to be rushed, and asked if he could see anything down below. Our boy can't see anything, so the old man let go of the cliff so he could get a better looks, saying that he should take a look for himself. The boy falls, cursing the existence of that damned man. In free fall, he tries to grab onto the rocks. While the old man wishes him a pleasant journey, Mephisto is very pleased. It seems the boy has met his match. The boy doesn't know how he was found, and the Demon King says it's very easy. until our protagonist asks for help. But the demon says he can't do anything at the moment, and the boy remembered that he could teach him how to use the seal of original sin. But that wouldn't be possible because he doesn't want to teach. Instead, the boy could use the mana from the atmosphere. And that is exactly what the boy does, managing to control the wind so that his fall is interrupted. But all he managed to do was slow down his own fall. That had been very dangerous. It was as if he had his illness again. Moreover, the boy has no idea where he might be. He knows the geography of the entire continent, and he doesn't know of a place like this. The old man said that this is the Blue Mist Labyrinth and that the palace was just a small version of this place. Even though his mana had been restricted, he is impressed that the boy was able to use the mana from the environment. Our protagonist said he had almost died, and the old man said he'll be his master but cannot teach the magic of his family. However, he is the chief senator and also the director of a school, and that kind of knowledge he can pass on. It's not a problem for the boy. Grassland is the name of the school. One he had never heard of. Mephisto seems to know it and is impressed that it still exists. He said that organization used to bother him a lot in the past. They use magical martial arts instead of magic. He said it's very similar to traditional martial arts because it strengthens the body through mana circulation, which is exactly the kind of teaching the boy needs most right now. Grassland is focused on perfecting various types of magic, which will contribute to the boy's progress. Our protagonist had already noticed that the mana in his body has trouble blending. That's why his mana flow had been blocked. Those teachings will be perfect for him. Our protagonist asked what he will learn, if it will be magical martial arts. The old man said there are no records of that, and that the boy never stopped surprising him. Now they are going to start training immediately. The boy is surrounded by wild wolves, and these are 3 times stronger than normal creatures, and he should know that the grassland method is based on experience. His first task will be to survive, and the wolves are advancing dangerously, to the despair of our protagonist who cannot use mana. Meanwhile, the old man continues observing attentively. Some people ask it's right for him to just watch, since the boy only learned how to use magic a few months ago. The old man is aware of that, and is thankful he can use the wolves for this, recognizing that it will be a problem if the creatures develop a taste for humans. And by the looks of the battle, it seems that his disciple is having trouble. He might end up dying at this pace, but the old man is quite confident. The seal on our protagonist's hand began to glow, and with that, one of the wolves ended up losing several teeth from its mouth. That was the kind of result the old man had been waiting for. That boy is completely different from all the others, and he is confident that he will be able to pass his test and fulfill what Grassland has been desiring for the last 1,000 years. Methuselah noticed that the boy is still lacking some things, and said that Agility will now have to step in. He was responsible for raising the Revolutionary Army. Not even the Imperial investigations could discover all the members involved. Their leaders are as powerful as the Magic Tower. They exist only to free the continent from the Emperor's tyranny, being the most notorious terrorist group that exists. Since it's the old man's request, he said he would do it. This is the King of Beasts, who said the old man is way too excited for having found a disciple. This smoker is named Agility Tens and wants to know if it's okay in case the old man loses his disciple. Mephisto is impressed that the boy has managed to defeat the creatures, but continuing the fight will not be easy. This battle will be even more exhausting, and he might not be so lucky. The Demon King is right. Our protagonist can only draw mana from the atmosphere a few times. Maybe he won't be able to win. He never wished so much to be able to use armament magic as now, so he began to remember physical training and that he had read something about it. This opportunity is excellent to put it into practice. The Tiger King's art that he had researched, a technique that can make his bones as rigid as steel. Developed by beastmen, they say the body is a small miniature of the world made by God. Just as mana circulates through nature, breath circulates through the body. All he has to do is focus his mind so he can tap into that power, making his body move through intuition. He doesn't need to anticipate anything. He just needs to see the world as it is, allowing his instincts and intuition to take the wheel. There is no need for him to have a plan. You just need to believe that your decision will be the right one. And in this way, he managed to strike the wolf with great force, something the Demon King was not expecting. Seeing that boy really is like a wild animal. It's bizarre that a human being is fighting like a beastman. And that's not all. Besides winning the fight, our protagonist was managing to do it all perfectly. Finally, he was already exhausted. The old man is quite pleased with his new disciple. Now the difficulty needs to be increased. Since he's putting in the effort, he will receive a tip. He should use some herbs that grow in the shadows. Mephisto is sure the old man is a sadist. The boy stands up because he knows he needs to keep hunting the wolves, and he's determined to do just that. More creatures advance in his direction. In this way, 10 days ended up passing with our boy suffering miserably. He finally found the herbs the old man had spoken about. The Demon King said they belong to the demon dimension. They possess magic and are capable of providing mana. For humans, their use is only medicinal, but it wouldn't be impossible for the boy to absorb mana from them due to the seals he possesses. He might even be able to increase the star level of the seals. Apparently, the old man didn't send him there by chance. Mephisto is impressed that these plants grow there. Our protagonist remains frustrated with that unorthodox teaching method. but now he can raise the level of his seal and his mana reserves. Not to mention he is strengthening his body, since he can't use magic easily. As he walks through the ravine, he realizes the deception had come to an end, because that might be the last creature. There was a person riding on the back of that wolf. The old man said the boy never stops impressing him, and he had heard that he is the best student at the academy. Even so, he didn't imagine the boy would show such growth. The voice didn't come from the old man. It came from the smoker who got off a wolf, and now he's made up his mind. If the boy is able to defeat that wolf, the smoker said he would make him his disciple. Unfortunately, our protagonist is a magnet for deranged people. Because of the smoker's movement, a cloud of dust rose. The old man said it took him too long to find a disciple, and he wouldn't allow him to be stolen. And he began scolding the smoker for making that proposal. Mephisto and the boy watched that bizarre argument. Our protagonist said that his opinion should be heard, and the smoker said he got carried away, adding that the boy must know the Beastmaster from the wanted posters. But the boy has no idea who that could be, and he said he's already the old man's disciple, who was quite flattered by that show of loyalty. That's why he can't accept the smoker's invitation, who was willing to teach him the eyes of the mirage, an art that allows one to control any kind of beast. Our protagonist said having only one master is just a social norm, and he's already eager to learn. While the two are getting along, the old man tries to hold back his frustration. Meanwhile, our protagonist wants to learn the technique right away, but the smoker said it's not time yet, because he needs to defeat that wolf first. It's necessary to control mana precisely to learn the eyes of the mirage technique. The boy did that by eating those plants, and now he must take the final test. Before the smoker could finish speaking, the wolf was obliterated, being thrown far away with a single blow. All of this was the work of our protagonist, which made Methuselah very happy. Mephisto saw it all and is no longer impressed, and our protagonist wants to know if he can start learning already. The smoker doesn't have much to say after that. The boy noticed that the one who had been enjoying his suffering had arrived. Looking at his master, he asked if he was satisfied with that. The old man watches him attentively. Placing his hand on the boy's shoulder, he said he had done an excellent job. It seems he's finally going to be able to do it. It taught the boy about the problem in the Chronicles of the Night. Apparently, they changed the name Grassland, so they walked to another place. Seeing the entrance of a cave, our protagonist asked what it could be, learning from his master that it was the Temple of the Chronicle of the Night. The boy was impressed by that information, because from that place he could feel a great demonic energy. Even Mephisto was intrigued by it because a demonic domain can only be created by demon kings. Now that explains the existence of those plants outside. The old man asked if the boy could feel it, because he's certain that the descendant of the Mervinger can sense that energy, and our boy asked why there is a demonic domain in that temple. Methuselah said these techniques came from the east from a very distant place. Inside, the boy noticed that the language was from another region. The creator of those techniques was originally an herbalist, researching plants. Until one day, he lost his family at the hands of a demon king and pursued him in search of revenge. Since his enemy was powerful, he changed his plan, gathering various types of knowledge, including demonic power. The boy realized that the resentment of the creator of this technique still lingers today. Even so, Methuselah confirms that the revenge had already taken place. Intrigued by this news, our protagonist asked who could have done it, and the old man said the answer was very obvious. It was he who had carried it out. Mephisto acknowledges that the old man must have been more powerful in the past, and that his abilities are astonishing, since that demon was powerful too. Hearing these words, the boy realized that this entity was formidable. The old man said he shouldn't brag about his feats, and that on the day of the battle, there were many variables. No winner could be determined. And as the creator of that technique, he simply changed his goals. The winner would be decided through a disciple who would appear in his path. It will be up to our protagonist to resolve this issue. If the demon is more powerful than the old man's techniques, that's a result he has longed for. Looking at that demon, the boy wants to know if his master wishes him to face it. That is exactly what he wants, especially that he managed to fight against its seal, since even as a human, he is capable of doing that. Seeing that he knew this information, the boy immediately became worried. But the old man said he didn't need to worry, as he had no interest in revealing his disciple's secret. Even so, the boy remains very agitated, while the demon king himself stays thoughtful. As trust should come from their reaction, the old man would show something interesting. Every mage has a technique they cannot speak of with just anyone, and the same goes for him. Finally, the old man revealed what had happened to his arm. He has the arm of a dark elf. Unlike the elves who live in the forest, the dark elves lived underground and were followers of demons. They were wiped out after the oppression of the Empire, as they were also considered demons. Transplantation with parts from other races is considered dark magic and is forbidden, especially if it involves demons. Aside from the smoker, no one else knows that secret, and the old man wants to know if the boy is feeling more comfortable. He discovered the protagonist's secret while examining his unconscious body. He did this so he could teach him better, but he would like to apologize. Knowing that he can absorb demons is the reason he asked the boy to do this. But he wouldn't force him into anything and said the protagonist could do as he wished. The smoker continues watching attentively. Even Mephisto seems to be interested. The boy thinks that maybe it's just the satisfaction of his own greed, but it's not a sin to have a goal, his master has one too. He couldn't turn his back on someone who wants to achieve his goals. So he joined his hands respectfully, showing respect to his master and accepting himself as his disciple, willing to contribute to his plans, something that made the old man quite pleased. Since he needed to absorb that seal, he asked what the demon's name was. But the old man doesn't know either, since he has changed names many times throughout history. However, within that sect, they call the demon by a special name, Wild Beast U. Faced with this, our protagonist is going to take action immediately. That demon is a king recognized by Mephisto, and absorbing his power will be a great help to the boy. But there's a catch. He doesn't know how to absorb a seal and asked the demon king how to do it, which made him very upset. The boy couldn't refuse his master's request, and he remembered that Mephisto said demons get stronger by absorbing the seals of their kin. But that's so basic it's hard to even teach. The boy will have to learn through practice because his amulet isn't reacting and the seal of cruelty happened naturally. Maybe that's the answer. Using dragon magic, he commanded the amulet to absorb. At first, nothing happened, until the creature's body began to shine intensely, and all the demonic energy began to stir, making the smoker a little worried. All that demonic energy wouldn't stop moving. The boy prioritized something special during his training, the harmonization of the various forms of mana within him. He tried to unite the seals with the language of the soul, and it worked as he had imagined. His strategy had worked perfectly. Once again, he entered a mental world and thought that perhaps he would be tested in that place just like he was with the Mountain King. But he hadn't found anything so far. In a swamp like that, there should be some birds and insects. Maybe it's not that simple. Everything is too quiet, as if all life had been devoured by something. He couldn't even hear the wind. He began to feel a strange sensation, something ferocious. In that place, there definitely exists a predator he shouldn't get close to. The boy's eyes captured that scene. Everything around him turned red and he felt something had moved. Inside the forest, maybe in the sky. He's not sure. But he is unable to sense the creature's presence anywhere. Until its massive jaws appeared behind the protagonist, the demon was intrigued by the presence of that interesting human. It was almost impossible to see the shadow and teeth hidden in the vegetation. That creature seemed to be made of endless darkness. The boy doesn't know if he should fight the same way he did with the Mountain King. Since he doesn't know how to absorb that seal, he needs to understand the situation before anything else, as there's no guarantee of victory. The demon said that Mervingers strike first and ask questions later. This is the first one he's met with patience. Our boy was surprised that his identity had already been identified, and the demon said there were more interesting things there. Because the boy possesses a seal, Mephisto's, as well as another of lower hierarchy like the heart of the dragon. The boy feels that to that demon, he's just a meal. He imagines that the battle is about to begin, and the demon revealed that he was expecting an ordinary person. His enormous body began to move, causing the ground to shake. Revealing his size, the demon said it would be worth changing places, and told our protagonist to stay hungry. He had to keep desiring more and more, to satisfy his own ambitions and greed. By doing so, they would meet again soon. After that intense experience, the boy returned to his body, immediately checking the seal on his arm. Around him, they were trying to understand if everything had ended. Mephisto didn't expect it to be so easy, nor did the boy. The Demon King believes that this was the only solution the creature found, and that it wants to revisit the body of our protagonist. Thinking about the creature's words, the boy imagines he must continue strengthening that seal. The boy asked if Mephisto could say the name of the demon, but he refused, until someone said the true name is Evil God. Methuselah said the demon must have weakened after losing to him. Mephisto doesn't like that the old man always shows up when no one asks for him, and that he knows so much about demonic names. Our protagonist had planned to ask his master about the demon's name, but was caught off guard. And the old man said something peculiar, ferocity. That seal he had acquired is the seal of ferocity. It was known as a greedy spirit, a weak demon, very cautious, but one who remained hungry for a long time. And now the boy will be able to sense imminent danger because of that seal, and also be able to identify the power and weakness of his enemies, as if he had a sixth sense due to mana manipulation, causing his heart to race and all his senses to go on high alert. Methuselah named it the spider sense. This kind of knowledge doesn't come easily. His master and the ancestors of that sect suffered greatly to obtain it. Knowledge accumulated over 1,000 years to reach a single goal. Now the boy began to use the seal of ferocity. Demonic shadows had emerged behind him, growing vigorously. Several lights appeared in that hall. The boy found it strange and asked his master about the spider's sense and how his senses would behave. He doesn't know why it was activated in that situation, until someone called him by name. Seeing had arrived and said they were in big trouble. While he spoke about what was happening outside, the old man and the smoker began to cry, feeling nostalgic for the boy, who had just received devastating news. The Fire Witch is still waiting for the return of the Radiant Star. And apparently she has many interests in our protagonist. Witch said not to let the girl in yet, because she would speak with her personally. The protagonist's sister had arrived to see him. Back at the castle, our boy said Scene should have tried to stop his sister from doing that, but he's not able to stop that crazy witch and made it clear that it wasn't his fault. What makes it worse is that her competitive spirit has been flaring up recently because of the protagonist, and he sincerely hopes that nothing happened. The girl knows the protagonist's sister has made sacrifices for him her whole life and is likely less talented in magic than he is. And it seems she knows that our protagonist cares a lot about his own sister. That's why she wants to know what kind of person she is. And the protagonist's sister had already arrived at the Narraster residence. At the entrance, they said she couldn't enter yet since she didn't have an invitation. A bit embarrassed, she asked them to try to speak with Scene as he already knew she was on her way. The guards said they wouldn't do that, and that they had orders from their mistress not to let her in. While the girl tries to understand, the witch appeared to meet her. The protagonist's sister looked back, finally meeting Scene's older sister. Bowing politely before her, Hayes introduced herself, saying she had heard many stories to her brother, that she is a graceful and very talented woman, but in person, the description doesn't come close to reality. Hayes wants to know why her entry was blocked, as she can't understand a reason for it. The Fire Witch said she couldn't allow just anyone in, and that girl could be in disguise or a spy, even if she's the Duke's sister. There are procedures for this kind of thing. Hayes asked what she should do to make her believe her. The witch would only believe her if she were defeated in battle. Hayes said that would be impossible because she's not able to use magic. So the witch suggested they use aura instead. Hayes warned that she might get hurt. The rules would be simple. A huge explosion occurred. It was a procedure to confirm her identity. The protagonist's sister proved to be quite agile, while the witch remained interested in her. Curious about that hammer, she asked if the girl could move with that in her hands. But that wouldn't be a problem for Hayes. She asked if she used to play when she was a child. One single movement was all it took, managing to throw several rocks in the direction of the Fire Witch, who replied that she used to play a lot when she was little. She kept summoning even bigger flames, launching an attack toward the protagonist's sister, saying she had never lost to her brother when they were kids. Hayes revealed that she had never lost either due to her immense desire to always win, throwing her hammer in the direction of the lunatic, who became worried seeing what was happening, barely dodging the attack. But she found it impressive that in a family of mages there is someone with that kind of strength, able to use a hammer that big without using aura. As she thought, she saw a small marking on the hammer's handle. There was a black skull there. This is the symbol of the most powerful mercenary group on the continent. The two kept watching each other, and the fight didn't seem to be over. But it was interrupted by the arrival of the protagonist. The Fire Witch didn't want things to end that way, because the fight was getting more and more interesting. Our protagonist was immediately grabbed by the neck. Scene desperately tried to approach those dangerous youngsters, only to see his best friend hanging by the neck in the hands of his own sister. The boy apologized for interrupting her fun and asked her to calm down. But the girl was struggling to contain her own anger, saying that she and her brother needed to have a very serious conversation. The Fire Witch remained thoughtful, holding a paper in her hands. She was trying to gather information about Hayes, but it wasn't easy. That mercenary group is very influential, and they have many enemies, which is why their identities remain secret. She decided she's going to use this opportunity to make a friend her own age. It's hard to meet a Black Skull mercenary, as they've interacted with very few families. It would be very advantageous to have such a friendship. The Fire Witch has nothing to lose. Outside, Hayes continued swinging her gigantic hammer, trying her best to hit our protagonist's head. She knows her brother's fame is growing, and that he's now able to use magic. Because of that, he also learned to rebel against her. The boy grows increasingly worried, as the blows from that hammer could be fatal. If it weren't for his spider sense, he really could have died from that strike. She was always a bit abusive and would try to break his legs if he caused trouble, just so he wouldn't do it again. Mephisto had never seen a boy so confused, recognizing that his sister truly is a Mervinger, but he didn't expect her to be an aura user. It's the first time he's seen something like this, which makes the experience even more interesting. Hayes is eager to see if her brother can dodge the next attack. The boy decided he would use magic to defend himself, creating a large magical barrier, which was struck by his sister's hammer. Feeling the pressure of that blow, he began asking if she was really being serious, because he wouldn't be able to dodge that, until he realized the pressure had ended. Seeing his sister extend the war hammer to him, she was very relieved when she learned he was going to dig into a dragon's nest, because she was sure he was having problems due to the condition he had, yet he kept giving his all. Since then, he's only gotten into trouble, disappearing for months without telling her anything. Hayes wants to know if he remembers the last time they spoke, revealing that she lost contact with him for 6 months. That made her extremely worried. She was always overprotective, and she always stood by our protagonist. Even if he didn't like that abusive side, he understood why she acted that way. After they lost their parents, all they had left was each other. And when he was little, the boy caused a lot of trouble. His sister had to become an adult far too quickly. Our protagonist said he found their family's calling, and that's what he's been dedicated to. He thought he didn't mean to revive their family's name because he wasn't sure it made sense. But after everything he lived through, something crossed his mind. This world could be overtaken by demons at any moment. Hiding would be a disgrace to their parents' memory. And he said he would go north because there is a legacy left there by their ancestors. No matter how dangerous it is, he has decided he will follow this path, just like his ancestors once did, until their family name is known throughout the world, especially in the places he has already passed, so that his purpose shines like the stars in the sky. Although emotional, Hayes was glad to hear those words, saying that if he disappears again, she really will crush his skull. She was genuinely serious about that. Mephisto regrets that the fun is over, as he was rooting for the girl. At nightfall, a mysterious man is approaching the lake. In his hands is an artifact, a small statue and entity, and he will use it so that Lord Azazel may revive once again. Birds are flying across the sky, and in the midst of those mountains, the boy continues meditating. 3 months have passed. That bird is ready to attack the boy, and with a blindfold over his eyes, he remains completely still until his spider sense tells him how to move. Sensing the hawk's approach, the smoker said he learns way too fast, and he didn't expect him to master those eyes so quickly. An attack was launched in the smoker's direction, and the boy was already training in the company of the old man, who noticed that he had mastered the spider's sense with expertise. He had already done everything possible in that place and should now seek his growth through real battles. Sitting on the ground, our protagonist is relieved that he doesn't have to see that old man again. For the old man, those days passed like seconds, but the boy knows he was tormented during that time. Still, he's grateful for everything he learned. Knowing that he is heading north, the smoker said he could bring back some gifts, something the boy has no desire to do as he doesn't plan on seeing them again. For a brief moment, he looks at them in silence, disappearing into the sky immediately, wishing they remain healthy and happy. The smoker said it reminds him of the old days when they explored the continent, and the old man said everything used to be better back then when he still had his strength. Now he spends what little time he has left in that place. The smoker wonders what Set, an old companion of theirs, would say if he knew what was going on there. Even the old man imagines Set would just complain that they are old men waiting for their own deaths, because compared to him, they're just children. It's amazing that our protagonist left those masters behind just to go to the north. The boy left the excavation rites with the crazed witch. In return, she had already prepared a carriage to take him to the north and would take care of his enrollment at the academy. Our protagonist left it in her hands because the girl is a fanatic for dragons, though he didn't expect her to be so happy. His relationship with the Narrister family grew even closer, and there's another person there in debt to him. A man sheathes his sword, saying that Bastard is already hurting his feelings. No matter how weak he has become, he thought that while surrounded by several bodies on the ground, that wasn't enough to finish him off, and the Blue Lion was feeling underestimated. Some of his men say the Blue Wolf must be growing impatient, besides knowing that the Blue Lion wants to meet the protagonist of the story. All of this is part of Isabel's assumptions, which were immediately praised by the others. The Blue Lion said it's his duty to handle the family's problems, and his men must ensure the princess's safety. He will meet the Duke of the Radiant Star personally to thank him. His men listened attentively, because afterward, they would decide what to do about their internal problems. The masked man wants to know why Paul isn't a Blue Lion yet and heard there was an unexpected distraction. The masked one thought it would be easy to get rid of a sick person and didn't expect the protagonist to intervene in his plans. It's still not time to interfere with the Mervinger, and his priority is to take care of the Blue One. And he told Hilton to continue with the plan, because when Paul becomes a Blue Lion, his body will be taken. For the cause of the great Azazel, several birds begin to fly as if announcing an omen. The carriage is already ready to depart. Our protagonist is already desperate because he planned to make that trip peacefully. He didn't need a coachman, and he also didn't need Scene to make the trip with him, although it is interesting to travel with a friend. By now, his sister should have left a long time ago. Not to mention his master should also stay home and rest. The old man said he wanted to breathe fresh air, while the smoker didn't want to feel abandoned by his disciple. Mephisto said this would be a very interesting trip, as what he hates most in life is being irritated. Our protagonist, who wanted to spend some time alone, is quite annoyed. This feels like a family trip. Before that, everyone was properly introduced during a brief friendly meeting. Scene was staring intently at the animals, while Hayes was playing with the white tiger. The smoker seems to have many stories to tell, while the old man remains very attentive. Our protagonist realized there's no changing what's going to happen. The carriage had already set off, and he needs to take that small artifact he received from Otto to the temple. Despite all this, the journey could be quite interesting. Guy is sitting in an armchair. He confirms that everyone had departed for the north, and that's exactly what his servant said. The servant wants to know if something good has happened. While deep in thought, the patriarch said it's quite interesting, because that combination of people is absurd. Hades told our protagonist that he should have better manners in front of other people, and should learn more from Scene, who has dignity and good manners. The comparison only made the boy more irritated. Hayes told the old man that she intends to teach her brother a few things and asked if she could do that. And the master said that's fine. They're going to have a lot of fun with it. Hayes deeply thanked them for their understanding. Our protagonist said he's too old to be taught, but his sister's hand approached him threateningly. Hayes said they should take a walk outside, but he was already frightened and didn't want to go outside with her, because the girl was already holding the hammer in her hands. While being pulled by the ear, he asked her to let him be happy. Mephisto greatly enjoys observing every kind of suffering experienced by our protagonist. To him, that's very invigorating. They continue on their journey, and the coachman noticed something on the road, causing him to stop the horses. Our protagonist asked if something had happened. In the middle of the road, there were some bandits, who said those travelers were brave for trying to pass through their territory, and they were demanding that they hand over everything of value. This is such an unusual event that our protagonist and the coachman don't know how to react. The oldest of the bandits grew apprehensive, while our protagonist remained unresponsive until the old man got irritated, saying he would spill innocent blood. Our boy stepped down from the carriage, quite upset with that setback, but someone grabbed him by the shoulders. The smoker said he would handle this situation, because he couldn't wait to show his disciple that he's also a really cool guy. The great white tiger was frightening those bandits, a creature they hadn't expected to see in that place. Meanwhile, the smoker was hoping our protagonist was watching all of that, but the boy was already using his own magic, causing a large block of ice to appear in the road. After all that, the bandits began to grow very terrified. This made the smoker quite sad because he had wanted to resolve that situation, but our protagonist imagined he would kill the people. The boy realized they weren't bandits, but wanderers from the nearest village, and they were hungry. The men were kneeling, begging for mercy, saying they had families at home who were starving. But our protagonist remembered that if they were good and defenseless people, those bandits would be begging like that. Now they were in a delicate situation, because our protagonist wanted to hear an answer. The old man said he was absolutely right, and that the others were only there because they were forced by him. The only one who should be punished was the elder. But those men refused to avoid taking responsibility for their mistakes. Our protagonist wants to know if what they're saying is true, and they went to that abandoned village. The years had been very hard due to drought and hunger, and to avoid dying, they started committing crimes. Mephisto began to feel a strange energy in that place, and the man said even the animals were starving. And it was all his fault. The village isn't reached by the country's administration. Methuselah said those people shouldn't be punished. The boy listened carefully to those words, until his master reminded him that taking care of those who suffer is also a duty of the nobles. This situation isn't their fault. The old man was very grateful for this. He said he would never steal again, while Mephisto couldn't sit still, until the boy got annoyed and asked what was going on. He had sensed demonic energy coming from the fields, a great amount of it, which was also noticed by our protagonist.